think that the only thing that's changed in the last, since Martin Luther King, since 54, I think the only thing that's really changed is the black woman. Because there was a time, let's say my mother, you know what I mean, my aunts and things like that, they would say, okay, if that's the way you establish your manhood, I'm going to go for it. And my generation says, hey, no good.
Okay.
You must establish a new base.
I'll agree with that.
And we are, as a group, demanding that a new base be established. And I don't think that that's asking too much. Why can't we try it my way?
Later.
25 years ago, the strong family was still the backbone of black America, and 3 out of 4 children had both parents at home. That is true no longer. Most black children are now growing up without their fathers. Single women and the children they're rearing alone are the fastest growing part of the black population. Why don't you plan to get married? I'd like to know that.
You already have your child to think about, and then a whole family to care for. You know, it's a lot of responsibility, and then you don't want the commitments.
I wouldn't want no man holding me down, because I think I can make it as a single parent.
But don't you think you might need help in raising that baby from a man?
Not really. Male figures are not substantially important in the family.
85% of the head of household is a woman. Most of the men who should be in the household, they cannot make a decent living. And of course, it is better to know that a child will be fed 12 months out of the year than 3 months, which during the summer when construction work you can make a decent living.
The man in the house rule was written to prevent welfare cheating, to make sure that aid to families with dependent children would go only to families headed by mothers.
How many children do you have? 6. He fathered those 6 children by 4 women. Does it make you feel bad that you can't support your kids?
Yes.
How do they make it? Where do they get the money?
Well, majority of them, the mother's on welfare, and welfare gives them the stipend for the month. So what I'm not doing, the government does.
What would happen if the government didn't?
This would be a big disaster, I guess.
I always said, ain't that hard to get a job. Go out there and look for a job, because I'm sick and tired of just laying back waiting for a welfare check. I said, this is not how I want to live the rest of my life. This is not the way I plan for my future to be.
Mother had a choice. She could have had an abortion, or she could have kept the child. She decided whether she wanted to have the child, so therefore, I guess it's not sweating her. I mean, it's not bothering.
You think it's her fault if she gets pregnant?
Well,
I mean, you fought her.
Well, maybe not. Like they say, mama, baby, papa, maybe. You know what I mean?
If the parent is 17 and 18, uneducated, unmotivated, fooling around, wandering around, what's the child going to learn? Who's to teach him? When you learn something, you was taught by your parents. It was reinforced by school and your neighbors, but it was taught by your parents. Well, if the parents don't know anything, how are they going to teach the children? So it's not racism that I'm fighting right now. It's the lack of motivation. See, I'm not even talking about racism. I think we are destroying ourselves.
Wow.
Hello.
So many things.
How are y'all doing this evening? Mr. Chuck, we'll start with you.
You start with me, you say?
Yeah. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Well, I tell you what, man. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm behind enemy lines in the state of Florida. The NAACP said the National Association for the Advanced. No, I'm sorry, it ain't the NAACP. It was the NAATP, the National Association for the Advancement of Trans People. That's not toilet paper, by the way. They issue. So if you see me and Keisha together right now, y'all. If y'all see, pay attention. Remember when that was an American POW when the Vietnamese were broadcasting, trying to show that they were actually being humane towards American POWs, and the one guy famously blinked the word torture in Morse code with his blinks with his eyelids. So if you see me blinking, just know that the KKK is out back on horseback.
Good to know. Good to know.
But so far, I'm alive in Florida. This is shocking.
How's the weather?
Man, it's good though. It's good, man. It ain't like Florida in March is I can tolerate it. if it was like what July, I can't do Florida, man. It's too hot. It's
It
way
was
too
like
hot.
91 today. So
So,
listen, if the KKK was knocking, I got the strap.
Yeah.
So look, ain't nobody, we ain't having that.
We ain't worried about it. All right. Free
Blanche,
state of Florida,
or
man.
not Blanche, but Chuck and Keisha are actually they met up in Florida because Chuck had a funeral that he went to, and Keisha happens to live in Jacksonville, 2 hours away. So they decided to link up with Chuck and his wife there. So I'm glad that y'all got to meet up. I'm kind of jealous that I didn't get to meet either one of you in person before y'all got to meet each other, but it is what it is. Keisha, how are
I'll
you
say a
this evening?
story too, man. From my elders, I was telling Keisha a story. One of my elders were telling me that I met up with about some property values in New York, and it kind of coincided with what Chad, a lot of what you've been saying lately as far as generational wealth and how a lot of blacks liquidated their generational wealth for frivolous reasons. Because he was, telling me these stories about what it was like when he was living in New York City for. He lived in New York City for 45 years, and he told me about how these predominantly black owned or black occupied neighborhoods were, sold off for pennies, only to then today have those same exact properties be worth upwards of $1 million. And they were sold decades and decades ago by the blacks that lived there. So it was interesting. So I was like, dang, Chad was just talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll find those stories all over the place. I actually want
Yeah.
to fly to California, North California, to meet up with a guy that I know of who's 91 years old, a black man who started a trade school there in Northern California back in the 60s. And the reason I want to interview him so badly is because he verifies my research, which is that he started his trade school. And as soon as Martin Luther King was made popular by the media, a lot of black folks began to leave and drop out of his trade school and join the ranks of these kind of protests and marchings that were going on throughout the country. So they left work, literally put down their tools, and they decided to become militants. So anyway, there's a lot of stories like that. Keisha, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I am kind of in the middle part of Florida visiting, like Chuck said, with his lovely wife and their oldest daughter. My girls are here too, my two daughters, and I've made myself family. And so I've just been enjoying the time here, and I can't wait to dig into to our episode tonight because I got a lot to say about that first clip that you just played.
Yeah. Blanche, how about it?
I'm doing well. It's good seeing you all. Looking forward to this podcast.
We coming to you next, Blanche.
Very well said.
Y'all are welcome.
Blanche, you tired?
No.
Okay.
I don't get tired till about 11.
All right. Okay, so I played that montage. It's something that I wanted to get into tonight because there's a lot that's happening right now in culture, a culture that is, of course, far from God. And there's a lot of history there, right? It dates, of course, back as far as the garden. But if we're talking specifically about Black America today, there's a very interesting and peculiar history that a lot of people sleep on. And so to the extent that you have people that are commenting on trans stuff that's going on right now, on just a lot of things that are going on in the culture, nobody really gives historical context. And so that's what we aim to do with this show. We want to talk about what's going on right now, but we want to give you context. We want to give you a deeper understanding of where we've been, because if you can understand where we've been, you can understand where we are, and then of course you can understand where we're going. And so with that being said, I did want to ask the panel what they thought about that montage. What feelings or thoughts came up whenever you were watching that montage? Blanche, we'll start with you.
I thought it was shocking for it to be that early in time that they were talking like that. It just seemed like the young girls were actually kind of young, maybe like 18, 19. They seemed kind of young, like teenagers actually. But It's funny that the guy, I think he was the most disturbing because he looks like a little, a little broke Billy D. And he got the little members only jacket on, and he looking and he's smiling. He's like, "You got 6 kids?" He's like, "Yeah." He's just so happy and proud. And then he asked him, "What would happen if the government couldn't take care of him?" And he was like, "Oh, he's like, we have a catastrophe." Like he didn't even think about what would happen if the government wasn't there. So it's kind of like telling to see what type of not just guy he was, but type of guy the women were even sleeping with. I just was like, why y'all sleeping with these guys if you know you're not going to even marry them? Or and I get it, you're young or whatever, but I don't know. That lady said 85% of the women houses were single mothers. I'm like 85% back in what was that time period? Early 80s?
Yeah, that was 89.
That was 89?
Yeah.
Wow.
It look early on it, like early 80s on it.
Yeah,
Wow.
I thought
it was the early 80s.
Yeah, I saw that members only. Yeah. It's
Well,
even more
actually,
trouble
I'm
now.
sorry. That was 84. Yeah. So the guy that said that he had 6 kids, that was 84. But there were
Okay.
some videos in that montage that were 89. I think the latest that you saw in that montage was 1990. But all of that is the span of time between 1979 and 1990. And the reason why I chose that space of time in particular is because you saw a manifestation of what Nikki Giovanni was talking about in the very first clip, where she told James Baldwin that the only thing that's changed since 1954 to 1972 is the black woman. The black woman is who changed. And we rejected what our mothers and what our grandmothers did in terms of being submissive to their husbands, in terms of being homemakers and such. We rejected that, and we decided to instead go the way of second wave feminism, to look at marriage as being a kind of slavery and to be self-assertive in a way. And so that kind of self-assertion, and that reminds me, next week I want to do another podcast, another live, where I dug up, and I had to dig deep to find this, but I dug up some footage of black couples talking about what do we do about our relationships with each other between black men and black women now that we're on this side of the revolution. And this would have been 1974. And so they're having discussions about relationships and roles in the house now that we consider ourselves to be revolutionaries of sorts. And again, the kinds of things that the late Kevin Samuels talked about, you can see in this 1970, 273 footage. And so these aren't new concepts. These are things that have been around for a long time. But again, there was a disruption in the black household. There was a kind of interruption of progress, if you will, in the black household. And it's all due to a mindset shift. And it's amazing to me that your top scholars and academics, they don't talk about this. They talk about disparities. They talk about white supremacy and structural racism. They talk about that kind of nonsense that doesn't exist. They don't talk about the mindset shift that took place amongst many blacks, where we put down our tools, where we stopped showing up in our relationships, where we, if you're a woman, stopped looking at ourselves as virtuous women and homemakers and wives. If you're a man, you stop looking at yourself as a husband and a father. You started to look at yourself as a degenerate, as somebody who, well, why should I even try if racism, according to Martin Luther King, is always going to haunt me? Why? What's the incentive of trying and being a good old boy if white racism is just going to come and destroy it all anyway? And so there's a psychological thing that's taking place when you change your mindset because you go on over to the dark side. And so I want to get into that next week. But what Nikki Giovanni says, I don't think she's realizing it, but she's kind of setting the tone for everything that followed in terms of really a lot of black men in America, which is unfortunate to see. I don't know, and I'm going to look for studies to verify this or to that touch on it. But what happens to you psychologically when your woman tells you that you don't mean anything, that you're worthless, that you can't contribute or provide for me in a way that I find to be satisfactory? Because if you listen to the entirety of that interview between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, who, by the way, was a homosexual, both of them are homosexuals,
Both
but
of them.
she tells James Baldwin that the black man can't provide for the black woman because the job won't let him, because America won't let him, because white supremacy won't let him. You can't provide for me in that way. The best I can do for myself, if I want to provide, is I can go out and get a camper or an army surplus kit. That's literally her words. She says, I just want you to be there for me. I just want you to be a man who is physically there. And to a lot of people, because that clip actually circled the internets and black Twitter, as though she said something profound, when really she didn't say anything at all. You just want the shell of a man who doesn't provide anything, who doesn't do anything. He's just physically there. And again, that kind of throws in this kind of confusion, or this confusing dynamic wherein a man doesn't really know his purpose. He's told by his so-called civil rights leaders that he can't do anything, that the system won't let him. He's told by his woman that he can't do anything, the system won't let him. And so, and not only that, but over here, you're being told by the entertainment industry that you're a degenerate, that you're poor. You're told by Good Times that no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are, you'll never elevate in life. Everywhere you hear it as a black man in the 1970s going into the 80s, everything that you're hearing is, no matter how hard you try, you will never elevate upward. What does that do to you psychologically, other than to encourage you to embrace vice, to give in to vice, to look at your life as meaningless and join gangs and all the rest of it? There's something psychological that's going on there that I don't know that enough study has been done to analyze and examine. What say you, Chuck?
Man, you said a lot of things. I was jotting some stuff down. Again, when you get to the foundation of it all, I mean, the worldview of these, activist types, and of course, the intelligentsia, the intellectual bourgeoisie of sorts. I mean, it's you go back to, again, Engels authored The Origins of the Family a year after Marx's death in 1884. But even Marx himself, he compared the family, of course, to, it was almost like a microcosmic example of the larger, social structure. Of course, the child and the wife being the slave of the husband, because in order for the capitalist society to function, you must have a society full of healthy nuclear families. And so the nuclear family serves what is in the best interest of the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie. And so the first step towards dismantling capitalism as a whole is, of course, you must break apart the nuclear family, because the nuclear family serves what is in the best interest of the capitalist class. And so this goes all the way back to their fundamental worldview and how they view family and how they view the husband as the colonizer of the wife and child. Okay, Marx wrote about this, and of course, Engels would put it concisely in his work, Origins of the Family. I thought about too, when you spoke about black men and women sort of putting down their tools. You have black men, abandoning work, abandoning labor, and so on and so forth. There was a white communist activist, Chad, you may be familiar with him. His name is John Reed. He also went by the name John Jake Reed. He was an American journalist. I believe he was born in Portland, Oregon, if memory serves me correctly. But he went to the Soviet Union to do journalistic work. And, he was somewhat of a fan favorite of the Bolsheviks in the early 1920s. He ended up dying fairly young of typhus behind while he was in the Soviet Union, and, he couldn't get out to receive adequate medical care. So he ended up dying of typhus at the age of 1932. But the reason why I bring up John Reed is because he spoke at the Second International Communist Conference, what they call the Comintern meeting. This was held in 1920. He spoke. This was the Second International Communist Congress. And he spoke and he talked about how amongst the Negro in the United States, there was very little sort of organizations in place that were raising a kind of racial consciousness amongst the Negro. But there was one particular outfit that he pointed out. He pointed out, of course, Booker T. Washington's outfit. What was it? The Negro Business League. Chad, correct me if I'm getting the name of that organization wrong. And John Reed lambasted Booker T. Washington and his organization because Booker T. Washington's organization was being supported by, quote, the white capitalists. Okay, and he chided Booker T. Washington and his organization because, of course, Booker T. Washington's organization was, again, cast down your bucket where you are, get involved, build, participate, labor, etc., etc. Well, that was, of course, an obstacle to this kind of galvanizing of the working class, bringing the white and black working class together, of course. And so, those are the kinds of things, that I think about. And of course, fast forward when you talked about this kind of breakdown in the moral character of blacks in America, by the time you got to the fourth Comintern Congress, you had speakers that were part of that assembly, like Harlem Renaissance poet John McKay. John McKay spoke at the fourth Communist International, and he pointed out three specific organizations that could be used in the goal of spreading international communism. That was the NAACP, Marcus Garvey's outfit, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and another group that doesn't get mentioned often, and that is the Africa Blood Brotherhood. These were the three organizations that, according to Claude McKay, whose most famous work is this poem titled "If I Am to Die," something like that. Chad, correct me if I Must Die was the name of the poet he wrote. If I Must Die. And so by the time you got to the fourth Communist International, again, the goal was clear. The goal was clear to use these organizations to peddle Marxism. And then fast forward to the 1960s. This is when you see the dissolution of the black family. And this has been a goal of the communists, again, since the middle of the 19th century. And that's some of what I wrote down, but I'll pass it off to Keisha.
They don't call him Teach 'em Chuck for no reason.
And again, Chad, the reason why I brought up Claude McKay is, again, this is when you began to see with the Harlem Renaissance this capitulation to degeneracy. And again, we might get more into it later on down the line, or it may come up in a later conversation. But you really need to begin to hone in on the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s and its relationship, its deep relationship with the Kremlin and Soviet Russia. A lot of you don't know about that, but that's why we're here.
So Keisha, what were your thoughts when you're watching the montage, or your thoughts on what Chuck said, or both?
So watching the montage, the very first thing that I thought of is how deceived, so many black women have been with this idea that doing it by yourself is better than doing life with someone. Like, what an idiotic thought. Like life is difficult. Why in the world would you want to raise children, of all things, raise children by yourself? It is very hard to do. And it's so unfortunate that has been that we've accepted this, and it took me, I'll speak from just personal experience. I literally had to go before the Lord, read books, and kind of understand, okay, what is actually happening here? And it's really only by the grace of God, because I was brought up in a home where, that sentiment was said, it wasn't explicit, like, you can't do this by yourself, you don't need a man, but it was like, almost like, well, if you don't happen to have one, it's all right, you can just do it by yourself. It was, it was kind of like that. But you hear it in other parts of society as well. I think, Chad, you were saying, as men, you were saying y'all hear it too, in your version. But the Bible says, husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husbands. It is two totally different commands that we are given. because men, this is what I had to learn. Men need respect. Ladies, if you're listening to me, it is not a want. It is a need. Men need respect. And you can't, Chad, you were saying like at the top of the show, you were like, what does that do to a man? It literally, our words can be so hurtful, and they may not say anything to you. Oh, but believe me, it cuts them in a different way. And so this idea of this man, he's looking to you to raise his children, to take care of his home, and here you go, in so many words, or in maybe you're saying it directly or explicitly, I don't need you. It's so disrespectful. It is so, what man is going to want to go out and provide and protect when you're saying that you don't need him? They're not going to want to do it, and they might suffer in silence. And you wonder why they don't look at you the same, they don't deal with you, it's not the same. It's because you have totally disrespected them. And I think one of the things that we have to do better at, and this is something that, I teach my daughters, respecting men. Even if it's not your husband, respect your brother. I mean, I don't have a son, but just even if you do, respect your brother, respect your uncles, respect the men that are in your presence. Even if it's, if it's not even somebody, just male authority, because men, you, we like to think of men thinking how we think. They don't think how we think. And trust me, if he thought how you thought, you wouldn't want him anyway, because he would be very girly. Okay.
He'll be sweet.
He would, okay. Like my
I actually learned that word. When I went to Chicago. I heard these two black women talking, and one of them was talking about her nephew and said, he's sweet now. And I said, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Right.
I found out that sweet means gay. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that's a Southern thing. It might be. But the other thing is,
Chicago's not in the South.
Huh?
Chicago's not in the South.
Yeah, we say that up top.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Everybody say sweet.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I was thinking
a little sweet. He a little sweet.
Go ahead, Keisha.
The last thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The last thing I will say is the mindset, the psychology. All of these things. They start in the mind. This Nikki Giovanni dropping this atomic bomb in culture, and black women picking this up all the way around. I mean, look at the reverberating, effects that it's had. And it wasn't just her, it was a lot. It was a sentiment that was picked up by a lot of people. But the mindset of that, this is something good to do. If you don't have a strong nuclear family, and BLM knew this, that's why they wanted to tear it down. If you don't have a strong nuclear family, you don't have a strong community, you don't have a strong state, and you don't have a strong nation.
Yeah.
And so that mindset literally destroys. And we're seeing the effects of it. And I can't wait to talk more about the psychology. I wrote an op-ed on this in the Western Journal a couple of years ago, but about how the mindset of critical race theory, how it's beating into the minds of little kids that you're oppressed. If somebody hears that over and over and over again, of course you're going to think that. Just like if these women who have heard over and over again, oh, you don't need a man, oh, you don't need a man, you get out here and you really believe that you can do this all by yourself, when you're literally the weaker vessel. Like literally, we're not meant, our shoulders are too, like, I don't want to change the oil. I don't want to be, I don't want to get up 3:00 in the morning for the killer at the door. No, I don't. I'm sorry. I do not want to do that. But taking on that mindset, you really think that you can handle all of this by yourself, and we're just not equipped to do that. It doesn't mean that we're less. It doesn't mean that we're less than, okay, everybody? So don't email me. Doesn't mean that we're less than. It just means that we have a different role, and that is good and right, and that is okay. It comes from God. It's supposed to be that way. So Embrace it, ladies. Let men do what they do, because you can't be a man. Stop trying to be a man.
And let me say this too, Keisha, because you said something. Because see, that's where fulfillment comes from. Fulfillment comes from taking care of your obligations. Because when you say, nobody wants to go see the killer at the door,
Right?
Women,
No, women don't.
No. But here's the thing. This is what I'm saying. What I'm saying, because we don't want to go either.
Well,
We don't want to go either. But see, we do. Why? Because we know we have an obligation. We have a moral obligation. We know we have to, because there's certain things that comes with the territory. Because as men, we have a responsibility. Women have a certain responsibility, and we have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. But you have to surrender your passions at times for not so the greater good, or for the sake of what you're morally obligated to do. Right. So I just want to put that out there, that we don't want to go either. So it's not a matter of okay, well, you could just go ahead and do whatever the hell you want to do. That's not life. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. And to again, God, and let me just full circle. I'm gonna pass it back to you, Chad. And the reason why I brought up, because I don't know if I said this clearly enough, as far back as the 1920s, the goal was to convince blacks that their racial issues, their racial grievances, such as they were the result of American capitalism. This was the thing that the Comintern believed this was going to help kind of bring in and usher in this revolution. So convince the black man that his issues are his racial issues are the result of capitalism. And this, of course, began their popular talking point and refrain as far back as the 1920s. And then, of course, Vladimir Lenin would write his famous letter to American workers in 1921. So this is nothing new. And James Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni, and the rest of them, when you hear how they spoke in 1960s, 1970s, you'll see that they are the flowering of that seed that was planted way back in the 1920s, going all the way back to the second Comintern conference. I just wanted to pin it, because I don't know if I made that clear.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can I say one thing? Y'all remember that song, Aretha Franklin's Respect?
Respect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's funny because that song was written by Otis Redding, right? So that song is from a man's perspective, but that song became a song for feminism. If you think about, you listen to that song, when she's singing it, she's like the man of the household. Even though it's a man's lyrics, but when a woman is singing it, it's almost like empowerment for women. Like, when one part where she says, and so is my money. Like, and then she said, get my profits when I get home. Like, he's at home waiting for her to get off of work. Anyway, to me, that kind of stuff, when it comes to men, when men feel emasculated, they just indulge in more decadence. So that guy that had the 6 children, like, once he feels less than, he's going to have sex with more women. Like, so he's going to be worse of what he is if he feels he's less than a man. He has to somehow try to prove his masculinity. And most men will do that if they can through the conquest of women.
I get it.
That's how you can sleep good at night, thinking, I got these women. I'm still a man. In other words, I can't take care of them. I'm still a man.
That's right.
And so I think the mindset, when you have the women saying that you're not a man, and then the black propaganda saying you can't even get a job to support your family, it almost has the power to create something like this hybrid type of sexualized, undisciplined man. And then you see this guy now actually being celebrated. Future, for example, was celebrated. With he has the money, but his behavior is like the guy, being interviewed, where he's just 10 baby mamas is ridiculous. But nobody says that's a problem. I guess because he can take care of the children, but there's some guys out there right now with 10 children that can't take care of them at all. So I don't know. I just think that this effect that it has on the man is in his psyche. It just makes him more decadent and undisciplined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's real, Brad. You're absolutely right, man. You're absolutely right, bro. I agree with that.
I'll play the whole Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin clip, but before I do, just wanted to say thank you, Jahan, for the super sticker. Also, thank you, Chris Keys, for the super chat, He says, "Good evening from Mississippi." So thank you for that super chat. We really appreciate it. But I did want to play that clip real quick, and it speaks to both what Blanche is saying and what Keisha is saying.
Why can't we try it my way? I think that the only thing that's changed in the last, since Martin Luther King, since 54, I think the only thing that's really changed is the black woman. Because there was a time, let's say my mother, my aunts and things like that, they would say, okay, if that's the way you establish your manhood, I'm going to go for it. And my generation says, hey, no good.
Okay.
You must establish a new base.
I'll agree with that.
And we are, as a group, demanding that a new base be established. And I don't think that that's asking too much. Because if I wanted a provision, instead I would get a camper. You know what I mean? I would get a camper that provides things. You know what I mean? You get an Army surplus kit that provides things. I need a man. And black men have always been offered to provisions. Sometimes you are not able to feed your family. You are intelligent enough and you are sensitive enough. You are a man enough to work out a new system. Because we started off with everybody's protest now and we're back there again. As long as the assumptions are the same, nothing will change.
Okay.
So we must corner ourselves to make a new assumption.
It was at that very moment when James Baldwin became gay.
Right.
He was like, okay. Chain smoking.
His legs crossed, his body relaxed, his spine got jellified, he just started.
I mean, it just like, how do you listen to a woman just like say that? That's wild. That's crazy. And I mean, he was, but she's like, he probably didn't care one way or the other because he's like, okay, you don't want men, good, more men for me.
Right.
Oh man, so wait, I didn't understand. What is a camper? What is she, like a literal camper?
Yeah, she meant a camper.
She would rather have a camper than a house. Okay.
And it's crazy.
She's gonna be out there with a white feminist anyway, lesbian feminist. They're gonna be out there musty and sweating the woods anyway. I mean, you don't care.
And it's crazy because if you talk to someone like Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, and I'm sure Chad can find some clips if he doesn't have them sitting around already. Again, when it's all said and done, their criticism is always aimed at the Western way of life. And the Western way of life is simple. Everything. I mean, they decry everything that uniquely defines the West. Everything from due process before the law, and the presumption of innocence, and the right to own property, and each human being, being born with certain unalienable rights. These sort of Enlightenment principles that were made possible by way of the contributions of religious thought. It always goes back to, again, the Western way of life, and at some point or another, you'll hear them attack capitalism, which is, of course, me and Chad were talking, I think, a couple of shows ago, and how we're getting to the point where we don't even like using the term capitalism because, again, that's a Marxist word. Again, the breakup of the family is the first step toward this socialist revolution, which is what someone like Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin ultimately want. And I'm sure they have said it out loud and perhaps on camera at some point or another. And I'm sure if they have said it on camera, Chad got the footage somewhere.
Oh yeah, I definitely do. But no, it's what she's talking about with regard to, like, if I wanted a provision, I can get an Army surplus kit, or I can get a camper. What she's saying is a camper and a Army surplus kit. These are indicative of survival tools, right?
Yeah.
These are things that you like. These are bare minimum. Like what do homeless people live in down Skid Row? Tents. They're utilizing plasticware and all sorts of things to survive, to just get by from day to day. And so it's this kind of scarcity mindset from which their homeless people are operating, and it's what she's operating from in that video. Now, in another place in that interview, she says that she was part of the Communist Party. James Baldwin admits that he was part of the Communist Party too in that interview. It's like a 2-hour interview that they had in 1972. James Baldwin would say that he left the Communist Party not because he rejected communism, but because he rejected the American tinge to the American Communist Party. He said, I left them not because they were communist, but because they were American, right? So this kind of speaks to where his mind was. And another thing that he says along those same lines is that, of course, if you are part of the Communist Party, you're not supposed to say you're part of the Communist Party. So he's speaking to the clandestine way in which communists operate. You don't want to tell the world, especially if you are in a notable position, be it a poet, a writer, a celebrity of some sort, an actor. You don't want to spill the beans, as it were, and say that you're a communist, because what the communists do is, as time goes on and they kind of learn from their mistakes, they move differently. It was once upon a time not a bad thing, per se, to say that you're a communist. This is why Paul Robeson wore his communism like a badge of honor. But as you get into the so-called McCarthy era, and you had a lot of blackballing that was going on in Hollywood, it became less fashionable to espouse communist rhetoric. In any event, the only reason I bring up communism and the fact that Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin both belong to communist ideology is simply to say this is, to Chuck's point, this is the framework from which they're operating when they talk about this kind of new black family, as it were, where there's nothing wrong with a matriarchy. There's nothing wrong with a woman playing the role of authority. There's nothing wrong with that in their eyes. And of course, this way of doing family, of doing life was very foreign to blacks throughout the 1960s, but it became more of the norm because there was a psychological shift that took place. There was a mindset shift that took place that basically gave rise to this new black man that was wholly different than what his father and what his grandfather was doing. I know I make this point all the time, but the reason why I utilize clips like this is to give you examples of what I'm talking about, because it's one thing for me to just say it. It's a different thing entirely when I can actually show you in black and white or in color what has transpired from the 1960s to today.
Yeah.
But Blanche, what was your thoughts besides the image of Nikki Giovanni and a white lesbian woman in a camper musty? What were your thoughts when you saw that clip?
I just think it's ironic that you have two people that are gay talking about the traditional black family, and to me it's just more propaganda, because he's sitting there agreeing and she's sitting there putting out the propaganda of basically the woman being in charge, because she's saying come up with a new system or a new way. But how could he if he can't get a job? So basically what you're saying is you want the man to just yield to the woman. If he can't work, the new system is, okay, I follow your lead, because she's the one, like you just said earlier, she's a survivalist. She can survive on her own. She doesn't actually need the man to survive. So if he's there, then what good is he if he can't provide? Oh, like you said, she said in the interview, he can just be there for me, be there for my emotional support. I don't need you to provide or lead. Just be there when I'm feeling emotional at that moment. I'm imagining love, sex, and hold me, wash my hair, all that kind of stuff. Wash my feet. But I just think it's crazy that neither one of these people care about traditional family. Neither one of them. And they're speaking to the masses of black people and planting these seeds. I think that James Baldwin feeds into the decadence of men. Let these men do what they want to do. He was running around with women. I think he dated what's name for a time, Nina Simone. Then he is running around with guys, and then Nikki Giovanni, she was running around with men, and then she's running around with. So anyway, these people are basically just propaganda tools, and I watched the interview, not all of it, but I didn't see what they said. It was profound. I'm like, the videos went viral, but I'm like, what are they actually saying? They're not saying anything. They're just saying that they're gonna concede to feminism. So that's what I thought.
Yeah. I it's so destructive, honestly. Like, it is, if you don't have proper structure in a family, like, that is literally where everything begins. Even that other lady who was talking about, like, the education system is, or at being educated, and I forget exactly what she was saying, but it was almost like, oh well, if the parents aren't educated, then therefore they don't know what to do. Well, this is what I understand. Maybe I misunderstood, but
You're talking about the
if
one
the
with
parents,
the her name is Papel. Her last name is Papel, and she's in a interview of sorts with Thomas Sowell and William Buckley. Is that the one you're referring to?
oh no, I'm
He's talking
saying,
about
you
what you
no,
just
what you
played.
just played in the
Oh, got
montage.
you.
There was
Okay,
a
I'm sorry.
lady, it was a black lady, and she was saying, like, what I'm concerned about is the children being educated, but if the parents don't know, then they can't, basically, like, they can't make proper
Oh,
decisions.
got you. Yeah, I remember.
But it
Yep.
goes back to that interview with Thomas Sowell and that feminist chick. Parents, like, that has nothing to do with it. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. There were plenty of parents before we had mass compulsory education or
Couldn't read.
schooling. Hmm?
Couldn't read.
Exactly. They could not read, but
Right.
they knew that education was paramount, and they did what they had to do to make sure that their children were educated in those one room schoolhouses. And it's just like, this idea of I'm just going to say it, women taking the lead in areas that we don't need to lead in. There are areas that women are great in leading in. There are the
Like what, for
areas that
example?
we
Name,
picked
name
up:
one. Name one.
raising and nurturing children with your husband,
Who you playing?
with
No.
your
Hold
husband.
on. But you said that there are areas where women can lead in, and Blanche and myself asked you to name one, and you said
I know.
raising a child, but that's not
Uh-huh.
even all the way true though, because like you need a man to raise a child properly. Like you
True.
can't
I'm not
you can't
okay. So what I'm talking about is, like, when you're okay, are if you are you it would behoove you and your family to homeschool your children, right?
yeah.
The idea is that your husband would be working and you're home educating your children. So you are leading in that aspect of the relationship of your family. You're leading in cultivating the atmosphere of your home. You're leading. I mean, there are just certain things that women, we naturally want to do. We want to beautify our home. We want to make sure that our children are properly dressed and their hair, like things that moms do. We just naturally do certain things. We're naturally geared to lead. So maybe that's the wrong word in those areas. Thank you, Chuck. Golly,
What you meant when you
Blanche and Chad, like, what? Where is it, Keisha? What? We do have areas that we have to be responsible for. It's just the areas that we have taken on, we're out of pocket. It's not those areas. We do have purpose. I mean, we do have a space now. Golly.
Just believe in a specific role.
Thanks, homeboy. Thank you. Y'all ready to throw me under the whole
No.
But yeah, so we've taken up the wrong mantle, and letting these communist, Marxist minded people, and letting them be the leader in these things is totally just wrong, and it didn't make any sense. So
Yeah, I got where you're coming from. I just wanted you to be specific about what you were talking about, because you said, because Blanche and I asked you, well, like what? Like, give us an example. And you said like raising the children. I don't know if you meant to say educating the children, but whenever you provided, I guess, context to what you're talking about, it made more sense. So I was just trying to, help you out in terms of adding context. Is all. I
I
was
was just messing with you.
trying to
I
look
was
out
just-
for you. Yeah. So I think I watched that Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin interview at least 5 times. Just because, again, what's interesting about it is who's talking for one. To Blanche's point, also the year that the interview is taking place, historically speaking, in terms of the unfolding of the 20th century at that point in America. For that reason, it was interesting to listen to what they're saying, because there's a lot that transpired in America, specifically Black America, prior to that year of 1972 when they had this interview. And so when you look at Nikki Giovanni, who was very active in the gay liberation movement as well as second wave feminism, and you look at also James Baldwin, who was very active in the civil rights quote unquote movement, to have these two individuals sitting down talking about because at this point they have already wreaked havoc in America and in the Black consciousness. They've already done that. They've accomplished that at this time. And so for them to kind of sit there smoking and yucking it up, and they're kind of proud, like they're very proud of what they've done, but they feel like they have so much more to do, so much longer to go. It's interesting watching that interview from the perspective that I have, where if I watched it maybe 15 years before, I probably would have been just like a lot of Black folks who, upon watching that interview, think that something very profound is being said, when in reality, something very destructive and demonic, frankly, is being said.
Yeah.
So.
But hold on. But also, Chad, the fact that it's Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, most folks just assume they're saying something that's good. It's because we already been programmed with certain people. When we see them speak, it's profound. If it's Malcolm X, MLK,
Barack Obama.
Yeah, like if it's anybody that we've already been programmed to worship, they could be saying utter nonsense, and we just be like, "Yeah, that's deep, man. That's profound." Like, it hasn't worked with Kamala, but it works with everybody else.
You just too stupid.
Yeah, she just cackled too much.
Yeah, it don't work with her.
Yeah.
She just too stupid.
You be like, Kamala, you been to the border? I mean, it is so embarrassing. I'm just like, yo, girl, they are watching. You do realize that the foreign adversaries are watching you, and Putin is over there like, oh yes, let's go in. It's time.
Embarrassment.
It's an embarrassment. Joe Biden is bad enough.
It's an embarrassment.
Before we move on, I did want to ask you, because Keisha just brought up an interesting point, and Chuck and I were talking about this over the course of the last few days, and I think him and I might do a live on it soon. But with regard to like what's going on in the world, where you have Iran and you have China and Russia and North Korea and all these people teaming up and allying together, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Because for me, like, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of conservatives who are acting like, that's such a terrible thing that this is happening. And they are, in a sense, given credence to NATO and to the fact that America is aligning with, Canada and all these other countries. And so it becomes like, okay, America and its allies are automatically the good guys compared to, all these other countries. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you believe that we're automatically the good guys in this kind of global fight that's about to happen, that's transpiring?
If Joe Biden said, now one of my tax dollars to Ukraine, I'm going to go off. That's what I know.
Yeah, I know it's going over there.
Send one more cent. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I know it's going over. Nah, seriously though, man. I understand why you're asking that, Chad, and I'm not too sure right now, because what I see with a lot of these countries allying that are, our adversaries abroad, I don't know. I see a shift back to um, a shift away from the neoliberal world order into a kind of civilizational nation state type arrangement,
Hmm.
where borders, traditions, customs are being reinforced. It's weird because when I look at, and again, I don't know if you just kind of threw this question in. I don't know if this is the necessarily direction we're going to go on, path we're going to stay on, because there's a lot to unpack here. But when I look at, for example, a lot of the things that are going on in Russia, and you're hearing a lot of the public statements that Vladimir Putin has been making lately, and you always hear that old term, that old saying that never interrupt your enemy while they're making a mistake, or something to that effect. Might have been in the Art of War, I don't know. But nevertheless, Putin, he said publicly, I do not know what the West, particularly the United States, I have no idea what they're doing. They are destroying themselves. They are abandoning their traditions. They're promoting this perverse gender ideology. They've turned their back on their religious tradition and their church. And what we're seeing now, it's weird because conservatives are, particularly a lot of the sort of mainstream conservatives are saying, where you can look at a guy like Putin, and he's ex KGB, and orders assassinations, and of all his critics and what have you, and Russia is this sort of fascistic state in a way. Again, I'm not saying that Putin is 100% bad. I'm not saying that he's 100% good, but I do know, again, that he has. It almost sounds like a warning to me, a warning to the United States that again, you are in the twilight of your hegemony, and again, it's like this is on you. Um, and again, Chad, and I understand again why you asked that question, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because some of the things that I see Russia doing and some of the things that Russia is implementing, I'm like, I wish we would do a little bit of that.
Okay.
I wish we would do a little bit of that, because say, well, Putin wants to resurrect the Soviet Union. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Again, I'm not quite sure. I'm still trying to work it out. But some of the things, some of the policies and things that are going on internally, of course, within Russia, culturally and what have you, doesn't quite appear to me that they are going the Marxist route, and that Putin wants to resurrect the Soviet Union. I'm not quite seeing it. So again, I don't know, but yeah, it's not clear to me, Chad, who's the good guy and who the bad guys are right now. It's not clear to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still asking questions, because something ain't right. Something ain't right.
Something in the buttermilk ain't clean.
Yeah, something in the buttermilk ain't clean.
um, I think that, well, we just saw China. What did they say? I think they said Xi has not left. It has not left China since COVID, except for to meet with Russia. I think that's right. I think he met with the Russians, and he met with, I think, one other nation.
Saudi?
What's that?
Was it the Middle East? Was it Saudis? Who?
Saudis, that's right. They are literally, they see America tanking. They are like, they feel, I think they feel like this is their moment.
Blood in the water.
Yeah, because they saw when Joe Biden, a week, Americans do not understand, and I'm not like the expert on geopolitical foreign policy, but I know this. When you have a weak leader, and it's evident to the entire world, especially a nation like America, that because America has been a leader for all these years, when they and China has been wanting to take that spot, and America thought we were going to democratize them and do all, make them like free market systems and all this stuff. They took the free market. They're like, okay, we'll do your free market system stuff. We'll sell you all this cheap stuff, but we want to be the world power. And it Russia, China, the Saudis, they are seizing the moment, and it's like when you have the military of the United States of America focusing on transgender, and you have the military, the 5-star general up there talking about white rage, and that was a priority, and we have transgender day of vigilance from the freaking White House. Of course, they're like, okay, this is the moment. Americans are so tucked off in a corner of the world. We don't understand. We don't understand the wars and the all of those things that are going on because it does not affect us. We have been so comfortable over for over a century now. We've been so comfortable that we have not had to worry about any of these things. So we think that they don't exist. We don't understand that there are people who literally who want to conquer you. I remember when I did watch Scandal at one point. I was like, I don't watch that shit. I stopped a long time. I don't think it's on anymore, but it just got so crazy. But the lead character, Olivia Pope, her father, he was like, he was a big, he was big in the military, and I'll never forget. He said, I am what I do is the reason why you can sleep good at night. Is the reason why Americans can sleep good at night. And so there are people who used to take care of those kinds of things so Americans were safe. But now we're worried about pronouns and transgender. And the president is paying attention to these things. So yeah, I think our adversaries are like, let's go. Let's get it. They're flying spy balloons over our country, and it took them a week to shoot it down. They had already got it. We're having debates in Congress about if TikTok should be, which has everybody knows it's a spy app, and we're trying to figure out if it should be banned. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's out of control. So, sorry. My 2 cents.
Well, I think the greatest act of war is destabilizing the U.S. dollar. I mean, once that happens, America will destroy itself because, it's going to cause mass chaos and hysteria, and they know that. So the best art of war for them is doing what they're doing. Who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? I would say that when Putin speaks about America or Xi or any other leader from another country, I don't ever hear them lying about America. I always hear them telling the truth.
That's the crazy part.
So I always hear our leader lying. I always hear our people telling lies about what's going on, but I don't hear them lying about the U.S. So to me, it is a type of takeover. Maybe not like a boots to the ground takeover, but it's type of takeover. And to me, Joe Biden is complicit with it because there's no way you could see all this stuff and have half of a brain. I'm giving him credit to have half of a brain and not see what's going on. And I think the biggest indicator that we were finished and everybody saw when Joe Biden defied gravity and fell up the stairs. I mean, that right there gave every leader in the world hope that America was to be taken over. So I don't know. I think it might be a wrap.
Man.
3 times.
3 times.
Right, 3 times.
They cut away from that so fast. CNN was like, "Ooh." Man. And then remember when he did the speech with the red background?
Yo,
and he looked
cringy.
like he was literally speaking from communist China. And he was like raging mad and talking about like
MAGA Republicans.
MAGA Republicans. And I mean, they have literally turned the government against its people. But
Right.
when I knew we was toast, when they said that parents were domestic terrorists, I could not believe that the United States government would put threat tags on parents. The FBI came to Jacksonville. They were it wasn't just this like sort of no, we're not gonna really do this. It was a real thing. They literally sent the FBI out to these places where parents were speaking up. They had threat tags on parents because they thought we were domestic terrorists. Now the trans people who just stormed the Capitol, they're cool. The one, they talking about Corinne from the podium, the what is her role? What is she?
Press secretary.
Press secretary. Thank you. She's saying it's the trans people that's under attack, not the Christian school that just shot up with the 9-year-olds. It's the trans people that are under attack. I mean, we're living in just complete and utter insanity. This is insane.
Yeah, insanity. And then, not to mention, I don't even go, but just watching the way the 2020 presidential election unfolded. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. We all know what happened. We all know that the Constitution was flagrantly violated.
I saw the tape.
We saw the lawfare in the beginning and the lead up with all of the Democrat attorneys, lawsuits, the uprooting, the changing of our. Anyway, we saw it. How the vote, and this is why the framers set it up the way they did. They decentralized the process, right, and leave it up to each individual state. We saw that the authority of the state legislatures were trampled upon unconstitutionally. We sat back and watched this take place and watched the Supreme Court do nothing. 5 of the 6 battleground states were controlled by Republicans who saw what the Democrats were doing in the lead up to the 2020 election to allow all of these mail-in ballots with no signature verification, no date verification, refusal to clean up the voting rolls, in complete violation of the findings of the Jimmy Carter. I forgot who it was, a Republican who he worked in conjunction with to come up with this report to determine how we could clean up our voting system, because the cleaning up of our voting system used to be a bipartisan thing, don't you know? But again, the Republican Party sat back and did nothing. And so it's almost, to me, it feels like, we are living in occupied territory. It feels that way because to me, this is blatant. This is obvious, and what kills me about a lot of you weak so-called conservative content creators, and I won't name any, but you sit around and you talk about how, there is no proof. Chad, can I say this? That there is no proof that the 2020 election was stolen, but yet you openly admit that what the Democrat Party did made it easier for anyone who would make an attempt to steal an election. Mm-hmm. So if the point of what the Democrat Party did when they flagrantly violated Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the federal Constitution, when they chose to do that, why were they doing that, Ben Shapiro? Why were they doing that if it was not to steal an election? But it wasn't stolen, but they did everything that one would need to do in order to steal an election.
I got it.
But they didn't steal. So that's when I knew we was in trouble. And what really, really nailed it for me is that to sit around and watch half the country not give a damn.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No. The Chuck, I want to let you repeat what you just said because I think I interrupted you when you were on the roll. No. But
I was done, Chad.
Audience, you may have noticed that something funky was going on with the screen, and the reason that something funky was going on with the screen is because it's all Keisha and Chuck's fault. Let me just put that out there for one. Going into this live today, I was actually on time. Let me go solo real quick. So I was actually on time at 6:55 or 6. What was it?
6:26. Yeah, 7:20.
Well,
7:20.
Yeah. I'm Central Time. So at 6:24:25, I was already ready to go. I had my clips loaded up. I had everything ready to go. And it was actually Chuck and Keisha that were late this time. And not only that, but they threw me for a loop because of the way that their camera is set up, they couldn't both fit inside the little box. And so I was like, man, the first week that I'm actually on time, they add this other factor that I now have to try to figure out. And so we are now what, an hour and 12 minutes into the live, and I finally figured out how to get everybody into the same screen. So, but the reason why I asked the question about which side is better, right, is because I feel like there's something psychological, and I keep using that word tonight, but there's something psychological that takes place in terms of like believing that because you happen to be situated in these great United States of America, that you're automatically on the good side of everything. And as such, it's difficult for us to look at what's going on with Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China. It's difficult for us to look at that and see that is bad, which it is bad. We all there's nobody denying that, but it's difficult to see that we as America, when it comes to our government, aren't automatically on the good side of this, right? We are on the bad side as well. What they're doing is bad. What we're doing is bad. The threat that these other countries pose, our adversaries pose, is nuclear warfare. That's a threat that everybody is afraid of. However, your own government has been waging psychological warfare on you for 100 years, and is continuing to do so to this very day. It's as my panel just talked about with regard to distracting you with racism and systemic racism and transphobia and all the rest of it. You're distracted. And that is you're being psychologically manipulated in such a way that you're giving up your rights as a free American citizen. You're putting food in your body on a daily basis that is modifying you for the worse. Like everything that is happening in the world is meant for a kind of global agenda, and gone are the days where you're just free to just, do what you want, go where you please without being monitored, without being psychologically manipulated, so on and so forth. And so that's actually happening. We think of war typically as two groups of people, two adversaries running at each other full speed, spears in hand or guns in hand, just clashing and just, having it out on each other. That's how we typically think of war. There's all kinds of warfare that's waged. There's psychological warfare. There's chemical warfare. There's food warfare. Like your electrical grid can be compromised. There's more than one way that war can be waged against you. There's something called a Cold War. And so when I look at, for example, World War II, in school, we're taught that Hitler was a madman. The Nazis were taking over Europe, and somebody needed to stop Hitler and what he was doing. And so necessarily you had the Americans aligning with Britain and Soviet Union, Russia, and other countries in order to stop Hitler from what he was doing. Meanwhile, what FDR and America and these other people that they were aligning themselves with were doing weren't so great as well, particularly in their own countries. And so we sleep on what's going on around the world, and we focus only on what the media is telling us to focus on. And for that reason, we continue to go down this same road of calamity that we've been going down. And so this is why, for me, I'm a history buff, and I like to go back and dig through archives and look at things and look at what was actually going on, look at correspondence, look what was actually being said, to have a better understanding of our past and not just go along with the narrative. Because what you'll find is that this kind of global agenda has been going on for a very long time. This isn't anything new. This is something that has been in the works for a very long time, if that makes sense. So I know I've said a lot, but do any of you guys have anything else to say to that before I move on?
Oh no, that was the study that I was talking about was the Carter Bacon. The Carter Baker Commission study about how to clean up our voting system. I couldn't remember it when I was going on my little screed there, but yeah, the Carter Baker Commission report. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think the media is very, I mean, it is pretty much everything that you get it from some kind of media, because people don't really read books and stuff like that. And so unfortunately we take that because we think, oh, it's the free press, they're supposed, I mean, it was set up to that they were supposed to be telling the American people reporting on what was really going on, to speak truth to power. That was what it was meant to do constitutionally. But that's not what happened. They started getting paid to say certain things. They started getting, I mean, they still get paid to say certain things. Hollywood gets paid to put out certain propaganda. And then now it's just one big propaganda machine. So we don't really know a bunch of anything that's really happening. Like, you really have to, that's why I love the rise of independent media, like things like what we're doing, things like other shows that are coming around. And, they are going to the scenes, they're going to different places to report on what's actually happening, because we can't trust the mainstream media anymore. They're just going to say whatever, the Democrats, basically, because they're the ones that control the media. They're just going to say what they want. And that goes to Fox News too, many times. So, you might get a little bit more truth on Fox, but it's just, they're still controlled systems, and they're not telling the American people the truth.
Right. Thank you, Cam B, for the super sticker. Thank you also, Lady T, for the super chat. She says she has to go to work, but she's going to catch the replay. Thank you also, Mrs. Littleton, for the super sticker. So I wanted to jump back on this subject that we were on with regard to the so-called man in the house rule. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a rule that was established as part of the LBJ's welfare policies that said that if a man is in the house, then you are not eligible for certain benefits like subsidized housing, food stamps, so on and so forth. Also included in these rules were if you make over a certain nominal income, then you are not eligible for these benefits as well. And what people don't understand, because I see a lot of Republicans who like to besmirch the so-called man in the house rule as a bad thing, as a negative thing, and say, look, this is the reason why there's so much inequity, and this is the reason why there's so much disparity between blacks and whites. It's because of this man in the house rule. And I don't really think that they're looking at the entire picture whenever they make such an asinine claim, because it's not the man in the house rule that's the issue. The issue is that such regulations were implemented to begin with. The man in the house rule was a compromise that leftists made with the right in order to get this legislation passed in the first place, because you will remember that without the Republicans in the House and in the Senate, a lot of your civil rights legislation wouldn't have even passed to begin with. And so you needed the assistance of Republicans in order to get a lot of this legislation passed. And so the man in the house rule was something that the Republicans insisted upon because they didn't want a kind of free-for-all with the welfare system. What they wanted was, okay, we understand that sometimes women fall on hard times. Sometimes, their husband may have died or have left or what have you, and she's left to raise the kids for herself. If she's not a religious woman and the church isn't there to help her with the slack, pick up the slack, then where else is she going to get her provisions from? We need to implement some kind of regulations where she gets welfare, where she gets access to welfare. Mind you, a lot of these welfare benefits were established well before LBJ with FDR's administration. So a lot of these welfare handouts were part and parcel of FDR's Social Security Act. And so once LBJ comes onto the scene, he makes a compromise deal with Republicans and adds the man in the house rule. And the idea of the man in the house rule was, okay, if the family has a man, obviously he's a provider. Obviously he's going to do what it takes to, take care of his family. Therefore, you don't actually need a government handout. Actually, you don't need a kind of government provision because a man's got it. However, the narrative as it goes today that many people have, both on the right and the left, is that the man in the house rule is bad because it breaks up families. And the reality is like, well, no, it doesn't break up families. You have to already be psychologically and morally compromised to even fall for a so-called man in the house rule, to step out on your family, or to, if you're a woman, choose the government over your family. That's more of a you problem than it is a government problem. And so for me, if there is any blame, quote unquote, to go around, I put it on the person more so than the government. Because why is it the case that even though you have your so-called man in the house rule, you don't see as many, of course you don't see as many because there's more white people in America than there are black people, but you don't see percentage-wise as high of a percentage of whites who are white men who are leaving the house as you do with black men as a result of this so-called men in the house rule. You also don't see the same thing with Hispanics and with Asians and so on. And so you can't tell me that it's the actual rule that's the issue. It's not the rule that's the issue as much as it is the individuals and the kind of messaging that the people are buying into in order to let such a rule, persuade them to take advantage of it in the first place. Hopefully all that made sense, but I did want to give you guys a chance to speak to that before I played another clip.
Well, I hate to say it. I think women are kind of to blame. I don't want to, I'm not, y'all know me. I don't like to put all the blame on one person, on anything. But okay, because this is how I see it happening in my mind. The guy probably was like, "Are you insane? Like, do you want me to leave the house so you can get a check?" And she was like, "But yeah." So, like I can just totally see this going down. Like, I don't, even today, most women are the ones that leave marriages. Like, I can see how either the woman, and I'm really not trying to be hard on women. I'm really not. I know y'all are gonna be easy on me. Be easy on me. I'm just saying. I think that I can see women pushing this more than a man, because men just think differently. Like, they probably were thinking like, no, this is not smart this is not smart to do. Ultimately, I do think that, ultimately it's men are the head, and they make the final, they are the head. But I can definitely see women like making this situation so difficult that it either forces the man to be like, okay, I'm out, or they just leave. And I don't know. I think that I understand exactly what you're saying, Chad. You have to already be in a certain mindset to even accept something like that. And it's kind of like, I was watching Blanche's live the other day, and he was like, what? We talked about that a little bit before. And when he was like, you already have, like, all you want to do is, oh God, what was it? You were saying basically like you already are going to, you were saying exactly this thing. Like, you already have to be in a mindset to carry out.
Yeah, you
What
was
was
thinking.
it?
I think when Blanche was talking about when I said, when Blanche said why is it that
Yes,
every time the white man, this proverbial white man, lays out something in front of a black person, lays out vice in front of it, they got to do it.
You got to do
Blanche
it.
said, give a black man a gun, he got to shoot it. Give a black man a gun, he got to take it. He got to snort it. He got to shoot it up. You know what I'm saying? Why you want
They
to
put
blame
crack in our community.
Right.
Guess
Why
what?
you got to smoke it? Why you got to sell it?
Right.
You know?
And I think, yeah, exactly. That I think it's like the mindset was already there to go into those, different things. So yeah, it's like a scrambled egg. I think it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think it's a lot of things that were happening all at one time that made made this thing happen. And the one second,
Go ahead,
the last thing I will say is politicians are not smart. Like, politicians aren't experts, and I don't even like the term expert, but they're not wise in the areas that they are making policy on. There was a guy, Larry Elder brought this out. He was a Democrat in Congress, and he was always for pushing more taxes on small businesses, right? When he left Congress, he started his own business and realized, oh my gosh, these high taxes are killing me. And he realized that oh, this is not good. What I've been pushing for in taxes. He had no real world experience in anything that he was pushing policy on. And I think, just in particular Republicans, as we're talking about this whole man in the house thing, I don't even think they really they certainly didn't know about what the Civil Rights Act was really like, what was really happening. To this day, a lot of Republicans don't even know what was really happening about that. It's just many politicians are just that, politicians, and they are good at running their mouth, and they have no idea about these issues. They just get up there and they make it sound good, but they don't even know what they're talking about. And so, yeah, I think a lot of them, they push these things and they always support it because it sounds good, or it's going to get them more votes, going to get them reelected or whatever. They don't know what they're talking about. They probably had no clue about what was really happening. So yeah.
To me, I mean, this is envy. This is spite. I mean, you said, well, what is to blame? I wrote a couple things down. And I talked to Chad the other day. We were discussing some of the findings of the Kerner report. If you all aren't familiar with the Kerner report, you can read give it a once over, or at least read its conclusions and its summary findings. It talked about the quadrupling of the economic status, particularly when it came to like household income for blacks in the United States from 1947 to 1968. You see, a lot of conservatives even fall victim to the narrative that a lot of these social programs and a lot of these social movements for racial reconciliation were necessary at the time because things were in fact bad back then, but they weren't as bad as you think, or perhaps they weren't bad at all, because the system as it was set up, when I say the system, I'm talking about the free market system, it was working. It was working. The only thing that blacks had to do was stay the course. But since things weren't exactly equitable, they were able to exploit that vice of envy. But we were headed in that direction. So I don't know if it's men more so as women is to blame, but because see, the thing about it is that these men, these radical left wing men, they supported black feminism. You hear it in the songs, even fast forward to modern day. A lot of the rappers from Common, all of them, they talk about this almost like this matriarchal black queen worship energy that you hear in a lot of popular entertainment today. But even going back to the 1960s and the 1970s, you had a man like Huey P. Newton who eschewed monogamy. Even though Huey P. Newton did have a wife, he was a married man. I really don't know for what purpose, because he did not believe in the institution of monogamy, because Huey P. Newton himself believed that monogamy was a bourgeois value. Okay. And not only that, but Huey P. Newton would actually summon, just as an aside for those of you who do not know, he would summon the wives and the girlfriends of his fellow male Black Panther members to his bedroom so that he could have sex with them. Not only that, but he turned out many of the female Black Panthers as prostitutes in a lot of Panther-controlled businesses. There was one infamous location in or around Oakland known as the Lamp Post, which was a Black Panther Party hangout, and they would turn out a lot of their female Panther members and have them turn tricks for money. And this was all because, again, the Black Panther Party being a communist organization that adhered to the dictates of Marxist-Leninist doctrine, they did not believe in the institution of family and monogamy. And so this was being pushed by the men and the women alike. Also a man, and Huey P. Newton was also in favor of the feminist movement, and he was an ally of gay liberation. And so again, and we know that these kinds of perverse attitudes are a wrecking ball to the nuclear family and traditional Western, traditional Christian values. And so, again, this is just part and parcel of anybody who has that particular mindset. It doesn't necessarily have to be a male or female. It just sort of is the way it is, because the men are just as much in favor of it as the women.
Okay,
And
good.
yeah, and no, but see, here's the thing, and Blanche said it earlier. A man he's looking to, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, sort of express his manhood. Exercise his masculinity, and if he can't do it in a healthy a manner, then of course to him it becomes how many women he can conquer, and so on and so forth, because he has to feel like a man some way or another. And so again, it just leads to more, sexual deviancy. And this is another one of the things that we see, another variable that we see when it comes to groups who struggle socially, culturally, and economically. We see a lot of sexual immorality. And this isn't just true of blacks in the United States. This is true of multiple groups across time and across various societies. You see this variable when it comes to groups who lag behind within, relative to the wider society. You see this intense degree of sexual deviancy, and this is what you see with black folk. But again, this is what the left promotes. What we call the left has been the left since the late 18th century. But I don't mean to get too deep, but I'm gonna pass it off.
I think I would start with the men, and I say that because for the idea to even be enticing to a woman, there has to be a level of compromise there. I'm not just going to say that all women were perfect, but to say break up the home to get a check is very extreme. So for it to even be entertained, there had to be some values that had long been lost. Um, I used to listen to the old people talk about, men not working, and none of them ever said it wasn't because there wasn't work out there. I never heard that notion of no money. I only hear that when I watch videos about not being any jobs for black men. I always grew up being told there's work, you just got to want to work. And so I just believe that the men that weren't providing were sorry men, and the women were sleeping with them and having children. So she's already compromised with the man in the first place. So if somebody comes with a check, of course she's going to take it because the guy isn't any good, but she isn't either. But to me, it's a shared responsibility. That no man in the house thing should have actually did the opposite. It should have made men more aggressively seeking work just to hold the family together. It should have made women more aggressive to hold the family together. Like, just imagine if the government came to Florida Evans on good times and said, "We'll give you a check if James is gone." She wouldn't have went for it. Now I know it's a fictional character, but my point is it was family at all costs when it was that kind of scenario. So to me, it would have been almost impossible for somebody to come into a household and say, if the man leaves, you get a check. Like Chad said, and you all have been saying, there has to be a level of compromise that is extreme. To even present it without there being an uproar, let you know it was a problem. But I don't blame the government. To me, the man and the woman should have figured something out. Because there's jobs everywhere. Y'all could have figured something out, in my opinion. Because my grandparents did it, you all's grandparents did it, Keisha's great great grandfather bought his freedom. So there isn't really any excuses. I just believe that it was enticing because of the time period, because of the influence of the civil rights movement, because of the influence of these communists, these Marxists. All that stuff played a part to even the psyche of even the woman's liberation. All this stuff played a part in that idea being enticing. And like Teacher Chuck said, the men themselves were with it. You got to think now, just think about one of the most destructive songs in history is Jaheim's Put That Woman First. That song is one of the worst, most destructive songs we can imagine, because what he's saying is the the premise of the song isn't good. But listen,
You
you
better
should
put
cherish your
that
woman and all
woman
this stuff.
first.
That song is destructive because it goes into that matriarchal
Mm-hmm.
mindset where let the women lead. Even Waka Flocka was on Fresh and Fit, and this man said to me, he said, "My mother is God."
Oh my
He said
God.
he said women are God, and he said, "My mother is God." No, man, you can't. Like, and then he left the show because he was upset about them talking about body counts, like body count. Anyway, my point is, to Chuck's point, these men were complicit too. These men want to get off the hook too. They didn't want the responsibility of taking care of the household. They were looking for a way to say, okay, I'm good. Like old boy said in the clip, the guy asked him, if the government doesn't step in, who takes care of the child? He looked on his face like, wait a minute. He never even thought about it. He never
Right.
even thought of the government not stepping in. So again, a lot of these men, a lot of these Billy D's, a lot of these Ron Isleys, a lot of these fake players of match from that era trying to be pimps and all this stuff. The films played a part in it too. These men played their part. And to me, leadership starts with the men, so I got to put on the men first, then the women.
Yeah,
That's
man,
true. I
and
agree.
yeah,
I do.
and
At the end of the day, it's the men who are the head.
and
Yeah.
that's why I brought up, for example, the Kerner report to Blanche's point. I mean, blacks in the black family more so than anything else. I mean, it was growing, it was improving by leaps and bounds. As a matter of fact, there has, and Chad may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, or help me out on it, back me up on this, that is viewed by many economic experts to be one of that 20-year period from the 1940s to the 1960s was the most intense and massive example of economic growth in human history by one specific group of people. Again, it was working. There was no need. Again, it was just the whole attitude, the whole protest activist culture that this struggle, say it loud and I'm proud culture that became popular in the 1960s. And like I said, that's why I brought up figures like Huey P. Newton again. Felt other Panther members had to hide their relationships from Huey because it was known that Huey P. Newton would have sex with your woman. And it was your duty as a good comrade to allow him to do so. Again, because it was an example of bourgeois culture. Again, people don't understand. And I remember, Blanche, you did a live a while back, and you showed a clip of some broad named Randy. She's from my city, by the way. And she was going on, and I put something in the comment section. I said, these folks, I would never even be on the panel with these intellectual lightweights because they don't have the foggiest idea what they're talking about. They don't even understand or they are not aware of, and to the extent that they are or were made aware of it, they probably wouldn't even be curious enough to do the studying necessary in order to have a firm grasp of it. And that, of course, is the German philosophical roots of the whole feminist idea and the entire feminist tradition. For example, the very concept, the first International Women's Day was the brainchild of a German Marxist, a woman by the name of Clara Zetkin, who was a close comrade and confidant of Vladimir Lenin himself. I believe the first International Women's Day took place, I think, in 1920, 1921. But that was masterminded by a German Marxist by the name of Clara Zetkin. And so again, they do not understand the Hegelian nature of the very sort of worldview that they have. Your friend James Lindsay, I heard him put it like this when he talked about how feminism, particularly Black feminism in the 1970s, the Black man who embraced this whole grievance philosophy, this grievance culture and grievance attitude, if the white man is the enemy of the Black man, then once you get beyond that, right, once the margin is brought to the center, the center, once the margin is empowered by being brought to the center, in order to keep the revolution going, you have to find a new margin.
That's right.
And so within the confines, within the context of the Black community, although the Black community as a whole may be oppressed by the white society, the Black woman is oppressed by the Black man within the smaller context of the wider society. And so now the Black man has become an oppressor of the Black woman according to the Hegelian framework.
Yeah.
They don't understand that. And so the Black radical man, the soft, wussy, sissified Black man who thought he was so big and bold and proud, running around talking about power to the people, particularly a lot of those Black Panther members who were being sodomized by Huey P. Newton. No. Yeah. When in the 1970s, Bobby Seale went into exile after, and this is according to a story that was told by a doctor who had to surgically repair Bobby Seale's anus after he was sodomized and bullwhipped by Huey P. Newton. Bullwhipping was a common form of punishment for Black Panther members who either challenged Huey's authority or who got out of line. So I'm saying these soft power to the people men, they didn't have any defense when the Hegelian dialectic or the Marxian framework was applied to them, because they embraced it. So your woman, in essence, is taken after you.
Ooh. Well, somebody needs a proctologist, okay? Wow.
If you don't believe me, you all can look that up. Tyrant again, bullwhippings and sodomy, it was a common form of Panther punishment. You don't hear about that. And again, it relates to what we're talking about, because not only would they treat their male members like this, they would treat their female members like this. And in her book, she was the leader of the Black Panther Party, became leader of the Black Panther Party once Huey Newton went into exile. Because he had been charged for the murder of a 17-year-old prostitute by the name of Kathleen Smith. When Huey P. Newton went into hiding, Elaine Brown became the leader of the Black Panther Party, and she details this in her memoir about how Panther women were constantly abused by their male counterparts, which led to the flowering of Black feminism, according to the Black women that were in the Black power struggle, because they give detailed accounts of how they were routinely abused by their fellow male comrades in the revolution. But of course, a man, a fellow comrade in the revolution, of course he's going to abuse you, because he's not a man. He's not a real man. Bobby Seale, Huey P. these are not real men. So of course they're going to abuse you, because that's what weak men do. They abuse women.
Well, I had something to say, but that whole whole thing is kind of like thrown me all the way off. That's why. Okay, so two things: intersectionality, which is a part of critical race theory, critical theory, legal theory. You have to what Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell, what they brought when they got a hold of critical theory and they brought it, into when they started working this out. Kimberly Crenshaw brought in intersectionality, and so it's like what you were saying. So intersectionality says it's a hierarchy of who's oppressed, basically. So you have the white Christian heterosexual male, he's at the top, then the white woman, then the Black man, then the white woman, then it's like the gay Black or the gay white, the gay, it just goes down from there. And that's why trans women are pushed to the top, because they are considered the most Black trans women, because they are the most oppressed. And so they get pushed to the top. Blanche, you hit it on the head the other day. You said, watch, it's going to be a Black trans woman that's going to that they're going to end up praising. And you were right. And there's a reason for that. It's because they are considered to be on the most oppressed. And so when you are the most oppressed, this is the extreme of the margin trying to be pushed to the center. And so now once that person is accepted and loved and all those things, then it will be, the idea is then we have become to a fulfillment of a utopian society when there are no more margins, but they will find someone. Trust me, it'll be the trans human whatever. It'll be somebody. But I know, Blanche, you still stuck on the
because all I can hear is him saying, "Say it loud." He's like, "I'm black and I'm proud." Like it's just he's just getting punished. I can't even. Yeah.
That's evil. That is so evil. And but the other thing I would say is the mindset. Because what it would take for all these people to agree to not say anything, to let this man abuse men and women. It sounds like he was abusing, men and women, for them to sit back and say nothing. That is cult like.
Yeah. Well,
cults do that
because they were dedicated to the movement.
Exactly.
Elaine Brown said herself that even though she had this feeling that what was happening, what was taking place within the organization, the reason why I brought up the Black Panthers, because they are the sort of revolutionary vanguard. They are the example of what the revolution looks like in its best form, according to the new left. This is the post-Stalinist left in the 1960s. This is why I brought up the Black Panther Party. And Elaine Brown said it herself that, first of all, she dared not challenge P. Newton out of fear that she would be punished. But secondly, and most importantly, she thought that in the end, and this is a quote from her own book, that in the end, it would all work itself out for the good of the revolution. So everything that was happening was for the good of the revolution.
Cults.
There's no way on God's green earth Bobby Seale could have been in a room getting the Hershey Highway driven upon and thinking that was going to be good. It's no way he thought. It is no way he thought that. It ain't no.
Wait, you said that there's no way he was?
No way he thought that was for the good of the revolution.
No way, man. It is, come on.
Brainwashed. No. When thought reform is real. That stuff is real. This is one thing, as I'm learning about, the more I learn about this, people that are in cults, it's not about you being stupid. It's not about you being, it has nothing to do with your intellect. If somebody can get you at the wrong place at the right time, that's why you have to be grounded in truth, because being vulnerable to certain ideas and stuff, there have been many people who have been brought into cults who you would never even think. And so, yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah.
I could
No, but it's very it's
people who, I'm sorry, just one more thing. It's people who give their children to these cult leaders. They will give you their child. If they will give you their child, they'll give you themselves.
Yeah. They'll give you all of your anus so it can be later surgically removed, or not removed, but reconstructed. But the no, but this is very
That means Bobby Seale doing all that talking and his butt don't work. His butt is broken.
Oh my gosh!
He's doing all that revolutionary talk, and he gotta plug his pipe. Come on, man! Yeah, come on.
Listen to this. I was in the store. I was in Dollar General one day, and this man, he just had on a pair of shorts, right? This is graphic. He was standing there paying, and poop.
Okay, we're not trying to. This isn't that kind of show. This isn't that kind of show. I haven't even eaten yet. So
I didn't even open up that camera.
Yo, I'm telling you, I was literally, and he just looks down. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and walks out the store.
I don't know what y'all got
Left
going on in
he left
Florida.
on the ground. He
Left
left
it
it on
right
aisle
there in
6.
front of the cash
What are you
register.
supposed to do? Clean it up, Blanche?
I'm telling you, people who have been there is such a thing where you can be ruined like that, and you need to be repaired, and you cannot even hold your
Okay,
mouth.
like I'm not
Yeah.
even. What?
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. I don't know what Keisha's on right now, but the
What was Bobby Seals on?
Thank you, Blanche. Thank you.
no, but like what you were talking about earlier, Keisha, before you started talking about God knows what, was spot on, and it's very you know, animal form esque, very Orwellian esque, where like you excuse the behavior of the pigs, so to speak. In this case, Huey P. Newton's case, and others, you excuse their behavior because you, as the animals on the farm, believe that the pigs are going to get you that ultimate liberation that you seek after, and so you turn a blind eye to certain things, or you excuse certain things, and the pigs are able to lie to you because you believe that these are the people who are going to bring about revolution. These are the vanguard, the chosen ones, the anointed ones, who are going to liberate us all from this this oppression in which we find ourselves under. And it is very cult like. You're absolutely right. I did want to play this clip and get your guys' response to it, because I think it kind of speaks to, you know, speaking of Orwellian type rhetoric, things that sound good, but if you really listen closely, you get to kind of the heart of what it is they're talking about. So let me try to find this clip. When the fights keep getting worse, finding numbers in your phone, you better put that woman first.
Chad, why you gotta look like that when you sing?
Coming in late from work, you better put that woman first.
You look like Keith Sweat, baby.
I forgot to be your lover.
The Perry Homes area, with its thousands of children, has only one daycare center. 75% of its money comes from a federal government apparently less interested in the children than in freeing welfare mothers for work. The state of Georgia has tried setting up daycare centers, but federal support is drying up. 12 other Atlanta schools have had to eliminate infants and toddlers from their daycare plans. And that will make it harder for mothers of the very young to go to work or to school. Atlanta is typical of what is happening around the country.
The welfare system helps the disintegration of the American family. It offers money to families if the fathers will leave them and stay away, in that sense undoing the very stability of the family and taking away one of the two parents that children, of course, need. And what I have seen, I'm afraid to say, all over the country is that the legal system works against the best kind of home for these children. We don't encourage parents to be at home with the children. We don't encourage mothers to feel that they can find their destiny as mothers. We take away, in many of the most vulnerable homes, fathers from those homes. We herd foster children together in institutions rather than trying to find decent homes for them. We don't tap the resources we have in communities and with respect to older people so that they can help out vulnerable homes. We don't sanction.
Okay, pause. So, so far, this guy who's talking right here, you may have noticed that he didn't say anything that you disagree with. Yeah, right. He's talking about how, you know, the system is working against families in terms of, you know, the father is out of the home and there's a legal kind of penalty against, you know, women who try to get these benefits and they have a man in the home and all these things, and how we don't do this and how we don't do that. So he's talking about these things that you may agree with, but watch where he goes with this little rant that he's on.
Encourage and support in every way, morally, psychologically, and financially, the dignity and integrity of the home. And in the worst of it is that the homes that are most vulnerable are the homes that are least supported by the policies of local, state, and federal governments. And no wonder then, out of these more vulnerable neighborhoods, we get an endless cycle of troubled, delinquent, wayward youth who grow up even more and become the lawbreakers of our society.
So I don't know if y'all caught that. That guy is an actual policymaker, and he's telling you all the things that you may agree with. That the government has had a hand in terms of breaking up the families and this, that, and the other. But then he goes and say that these families are struggling because they don't have the support of the government. So you want the same government who you just said is responsible for the breaking up of the family to be the source of solution in terms of bringing families back together. And so this kind of goes to that kind of, pigs good kind of rhetoric that you see happening in public policy, that you see happening in government, they see happening in social justice movements, where they say all the, like they use so much of the truth to get you so far. And then at the last second, they slip in something that is supposed to be the solution, but it actually ends up making things worse. And the reality is, to Blanche's point, it all falls back to the man and his ability and his willingness or lack thereof to take responsibility and to be productive and to take care of his own family. If you're not willing to do that, then yes, your family will suffer, and you'll have demagogue policymakers like that gentleman you just saw who come in a very sophisticated way, using all this rhetoric, using all this jargon to make you think that he knows what he's talking about, that you will then yield the reins of power to people like them, this kind of social engineers, I call them, who ends up pushing policy that makes things worse. He sounds sympathetic. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but his solution, I'm listening to what your solution is. I'm looking at, after all that, I don't care how you get there. I'm listening to what the conclusion is. And if your conclusion is we need the government to support, quote unquote, these families, okay, you lost me. You lost me. Am I seeing this wrong, Blanche? What do you think?
I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's funny that Perry Homes was the first housing project to be, if I'm not mistaken, torn down. So I used to work on Perry Boulevard, and that was one of the quote unquote worst. Well, they turned it into like a nice neighborhood. So they made it into like very nice housing. So they turned the projects into something that people want to live in. But to this guy though, the solution can't be. The problem can't be the government did this, and the solution also is the government. So a lot of black folks you hear saying that the government did this, now we want the government to fix it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, how can they be the problem and give you the solution? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what he's basically saying. He's basically saying that because we didn't get this from the government, this is here, and now to fix it, the government has to do this. And now that same project was torn down and made into some higher middle class or middle income, higher middle income community. But yeah, he's just one of those, to me, Southern liberal. He sounds the part. And like you said, Chad, a lot of these people say that it sounds so good. Like, it just sounds good. Like when Charlemagne was talking, he said, who in their right mind doesn't think that black folks deserve reparations? Like, that statement, you'd be like, yeah, he's right. Who would be against it? And then the further he starts talking with Bill Murray, you realize he's an idiot. So it's kind of like this guy. He started out good, and then in the end, he's like, "Oh yeah, let's rely on the government." It's crazy.
Yeah.
Or Keisha?
I was listening to Kevin McCarthy earlier today on the drive down, and he was talking about, all these things that they're doing. I'm not too impressed with Kevin McCarthy, but he was like, yeah, we passed like 40, what did he say? 45 bills? I'm like, we don't need more law. Like, we need y'all to be removing some stuff. Like, just because you get in office, like, we're not trying to grow the government. I don't understand, like, why aren't we ever removing bad stuff? Why are we always passing more laws? We're always trying to put more on the people. And these are Republicans who are always like, oh, we have to do more laws. It's like, we have enough. Like, what? Let's start removing some of this stuff. And so I don't like when I hear people like this dude who you know that there's a problem, but you want to use the government to fix the problem, but it just creates more problems instead of removing the law in the first place that created the problem. Remove it. Like, stop passing more laws. So that's all.
I mean, you know, for me, I mean, I'm probably gonna get a little bit philosophical here. Why y'all laughing?
Shocker.
Y'all laughing.
Get my notes ready. Here we go.
Oh,
right. Okay.
Oh my God. Y'all. Stop the cap. Okay. Just this guy, of course, government got him in the problem, and the only thing that can get them out is more government. It's sort of like the typical liberal mindset, and again, I don't want to necessarily use the term liberalism and secularism interchangeably, although one can, depending on the context, I suppose. Sort of like the Enlightenment, run amok, and now we've into humanism and all sorts of hollow and deceptive philosophies. And my boy Chad likes to mention that when he's making reference to the Bible. But again, all human beings are born with a stain, right? And the Bible tells us that the stain of sin, the recognition of one's nakedness, is the result of man becoming aware of evil, the knowledge of evil. And so it's funny to me to hear these liberals and how, they aren't, again, I don't necessarily want to say that all liberals don't necessarily believe in God, or perhaps they think they do, but they don't quite know exactly what that means or what that entails. Because when you look at the condition of the folks that they want to come and help, right? In this case, we're talking about blacks and, the economic situation that they find themselves in and what have you. It's like, no, they don't want blacks to be the solution to their own problems. Because, of course, they need blacks to suffer because their suffering is the source of their redemption. Because God does not redeem them. Their earthly deeds are what redeem them. Mm-hmm. And that's heretical according to the way your Christian, your typical Christian Orthodox, or Christian with an Orthodox view of the Bible. This is the way they perceive it. This is the way they should look at it. And so this is the problem with liberalism. You must always suffer, and they must always come to your rescue because they are seeking redemption, because inherently they know that they don't quite measure up to something, some ideal of perfection. And that ideal of perfection is what we call God. And they reject that. And so they're looking for something to help, massage that inner need to try to find some kind of salvation, some kind of purpose. That's why you say, man, how can they keep going back to the same old tried, this playbook that just doesn't work? Well, that's why. Again, because they approach it with this kind of religious zeal, because in essence, it has become their religion. Liberalism or secularism has become their religion. And that's how I look at it. When you say, man, how can this guy turn around here and say this? Because he needs to find the true and living God and not this phony one that he worships.
Right. Yeah, mm-hmm. I couldn't have said it better myself. Because, listening to, I like research. I like historians and people who have the ability to look at things that the common person wouldn't think to look at in order to basically grasp a full understanding of the way that things unfold in society. So I enjoy things like that. And in listening to this man speak, I was like, okay, like I see where you got that from, and this makes sense and that makes sense. And then he starts talking about solutions, and he's talking about, you know, the government needs to support these families. And it's like, oh, well, there it is. You know what I mean? And the thing is, this is kind of how politics work. Not to get too philosophical, to use Chuck's words, but this is how it works. This is the way that demagoguery works. This is the way that Satan works, right? If you listen to when Satan appeared to Eve in the garden, he basically misquoted God, but he used so much of what sounded like the truth in order to tempt her, right? Temptation works by way of deception and by way of taking things and twisting them to mean something slightly different. This is the way gossip works. This is the way, it's kind of like a game of telephone. You put 100 on 10, as the cool kids say, exaggerate things, but you use so much of the truth. If you use so much of a lie, it's not as believable, right? And this is part of Jussie Smollett's problem, Jussie Smollett. Whenever he came up with his hoax, it was so outrageous that it wasn't even believable. However, if it would have been more realistic, if he were able to use so much of the truth and twist it just a little bit, he would have tricked the whole world into believing the hoax. But again, this is the way that this kind of thing works in politics, and the trickery is both on the so-called left and on the so-called right. It's there in both instances. I think that this scholar would, for all intents and purposes, be on the so-called right. However, if your solution is government rather than man, then to me, it's not a matter of right versus left. It's a matter of, again, pushing this agenda wherein man is not responsible and accountable for his own actions. And I can't source that to anything other than Satan. I just can't. I just can't. I don't know if I would venture to say that the panel would agree with that, but I just can't see it any other way. Go ahead.
I mean, it reminded me of something too when I was listening to Blanchard's show, not the one he did today. I haven't watched that one yet, but the one he did on, I believe it was Friday, when he came and did, round 2 of the whole controversy with Pearl, the YouTuber.
Yeah, just Pearly things.
And I forgot what it was, but it made me think of something when I thought about economic development, for example, because he was, anyway, you all got to go watch my boy Blanchard's show. And he was, he was doing a response video to someone else's response video to Just Pearly Things apology for the comments that she made about blacks in America or whatever. And I was thinking of something. What leads to economic growth in a country, and there have been peer-reviewed studies that confirm this, that one of the key variables that leads a nation towards economic prosperity is trustworthiness. When there is no trustworthiness within the population, there is no economic growth. Because in order to have a system that is based upon not so much, if you and I, right, we have to agree to abide by a certain playbook, right? So there has to be, a good faith approach coming by way of both of us. I'm going to come to you as a fair dealer because I assume that you're coming to me in kind. And so if I don't trust you, you don't trust me, there is no communication. There is no, so there is no economic growth in a society where there is no trustworthiness. So, for example, if I know a lot of us we've gone places, we've left our phone or left our wallet, left our purse, right? And you may leave it for X amount of time. You hurry up, you rush back, you go straight to the counter, you ask somebody at the staff, hey, did somebody turn in some keys? Hey, did somebody turn in the wallet? Oh yeah, somebody brought it up. It's right here. It's in the back. We'll get it for you. All right. When you live in societies that rank low on the scale of trustworthiness, you don't have that kind of thing.
That's fair.
And And as a matter, I don't want to believe it was the UN. I don't know what the definitive study regarding the variable of trustworthiness is, but this is what made me think about it because I was watching Blanche's show, and countries, third world countries like in Africa, and probably to some degree in the Middle East, those countries that struggle economically are the countries that lack trustworthiness. The people within the society don't trust one another, and you don't trust folks within the society when there is a lack of character. And we talk about character a lot, the four of us. And, then you cannot have a free market system, what we call capitalism, because capitalism is the only economic system that is commensurate with the very notion and concept of freedom fundamentally, right? But you cannot have freedom in a society if your society is devoid of virtue. And the question then becomes, where does that virtue come from? That virtue comes from the Bible. And if you don't have it, you cannot grow economically. Because if you don't have that virtue, that foundation in place, then everything else that is a byproduct, right? That flows downstream from that. Capitalism, free market, freedom of association, and so on and so forth. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. None of that exists. None of that is even possible. And so if you don't have that, and if you don't cling to that and understand that, then you're not going to grow. You're going to look to the government to come and babysit you because there's no trust. Because the individuals, we are the ones who need one another in order to ascend, for our economics and culture is concerned. So
very well said. Very well said.
Facts. Like, you have to have that's why morality is so it's more than just going to church and things like that. It's important that you actually live these things out, because when God's kind of a genius, when he knows humanity, like when you don't do these things, the reverberating effects of you walking away from that morality, it affects everything in society. And if you can't have a foundation of like trust and truth, then we have to then we won't have a society where we can do anything, and we will believe that men can be women and women can be men, and that's just not true. So
right.
Hey, guys, me and Keisha, we gotta wrap soon. So just to put that bug out there for you guys, we getting our producer pulling the plug on us. We gotta wrap.
Mama said it's time.
Yeah. My mama said, no, we not joking. My mom literally just walked in the room and was like, "Hey, y'all." Okay. Yeah. So we gotta wrap it up. Yeah.
Y'all gotta leave right now.
We got wrap. All right. Yeah, we got wrap right now.
Okay.
We sorry. Something came up. I'll tell y'all about it later, man. Y'all gonna keep the show going?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go over one more clip with Blanche, and then we're gonna wrap it up over here.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, their mom made them go to bed. So. All right, so let's see here. Let me take them off the screen. All right, so Blanche, I wanted to play this other clip and get your thoughts on it. Let's see here. Here we go.
As of the 1996 Welfare to Work law, passed over skepticism from liberals by Republican Congress with support from President Bill Clinton.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I pledged to end welfare as we know it.
And so he did. You were just sitting home collecting benefits. Bad for you?
If you're idle and you're home all day and you're not taking time to invest in yourself, so then you're raising children to move into a direction that you want them to be self-sufficient, yeah, it's bad.
You cannot be absent and you cannot be late.
Thus the Clinton Welfare to Work program. Single mothers ushered off the dole and into the workforce, often groomed by contract job placement programs like America Works. There's another major problem for welfare recipients right now: significantly reduced funding for job placement and training. You mean the class was literally about what training was available, and then there turned out to be none?
Yeah, there turned out to be no funding.
I applied for the training in May, but they were not with funds at the time. It was pretty frustrating waiting for funding that wasn't there.
So again, I don't know if you caught all that, but they're talking about how Clinton came in 1992, and he had this big plan to end welfare as you know it. And the way that he planned to do so was with this so-called welfare to work program that got women to work. And there's something wrong with that from the very jump. And I'm sure we'll circle back to that. But as they're talking, you'll see that, again, Republicans in Congress were the ones who supported this new Clinton kind of welfare program, right? Under the behest of, I think, Newt Gingrich and some others in Congress. And so you had Republicans who were the ones who said, yes, this is something that should be pushed because it wings people off of welfare. And then again, by the end of the news segment, what are they talking about? Funding, that magic F word. They want more money to train women to get to work. And then what happens to their kids? Of course, their kids go off to daycare systems and the public school system where they're trained to be statists and they're trained to basically be acculturated to this kind of new world order. And they don't really hold or share or carry on traditional values into the future because they are trained from the cradle to think as a statist. And this is the kind of vicious cycle of it all. But again, it's interesting to me, again, when you look at all of these programs throughout history, throughout American history, it's not just the Democrats doing it. You have Republicans who are stamping it, who are rubber stamping it, and they are just as guilty as the Democrats in terms of pushing this kind of agenda. What say you?
It's almost like the Republicans support the philosophy behind it, and the Democrats really want, I guess, the funding for it. It's just ironic that it's almost like the men are gone from the house and the women are there with the children. So now that it's like a void there. So let's put the women to work and then we take the children. So to me, it seems like it's a great plan if you wanted to, I guess, better acclimate these children into this sort of mindset. But the fact, and it also still pushes this whole feminism notion of, I don't really call this women's empowerment. To me, this is like more strategic, and that you want the children and the women both to be dependent on the system technically, because the women are going somewhere to quote unquote get training for a job. So they have to go to the system to get the job. And then the children have to go into the system to get taken care of while the mother is out there trying to get the job. So you kind of kill three birds with one stone because the father isn't there, the children are in the system, and the mother's in the system trying to get work. So the Republicans, to me, would sign off on this because it sounds good in theory when you say get the mothers off of welfare. Or who could go against that? But how is that implemented? How was that tested and tried? Did it work? I don't think it worked because women wanted to get jobs, they didn't have any training, there's no funding. So now you're going to ask, well, who gets the money? Are the Republicans going to agree on the money? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if this program even did anything. I don't even remember. I was around this time, but I don't even remember any of this going on. I guess I was too young, but.
Yeah. No, it didn't. It didn't work. And then, what are the psychological, there's that word again, trade-offs in terms of the state of families and women today? As you got into the 20th century, so basically throughout the 19th century going into the 20th century, and even for the better part of the first half of the 20th century, a lot of women didn't work. Women, in fact, did not take to the workplace until right around World War II. You saw this influx of women in the workplace, and the reason for that was for a number of reasons. One of which was that they needed machinery and they needed for things to be produced in factories to support our involvement in the war. So it's for that reason that a lot of women took to the workforce. But A lot of it came off the back too of second wave or first wave feminism, where you did have those who were funding women's suffrage, some of which were industrialists who knew that the more women you have in a workplace, the better it is for their bottom line, for one, and for two, the government gets access to a whole slew of new taxpayers. And so that was another reason why it was important to really push women's suffrage. And then another stake that the government had in seeing to it that women's suffrage was passed and that the 19th Amendment was enacted was that it gave the government earlier access to children, because they understand that the name of the game is who has power. And if you can use government education and government programs to, in a sense, get families hooked to the government and to train children to believe that the government is God, that the government is end all be all, that secures future voters to keep your ilk ever in power. And so as you get, as the 20th century kind of unfolds, you get more women into the workplace, you get children, the government access to children at an earlier age. Naturally, what you see happen is what happens, namely that families become more and more broken down. You see a kind of increase in individual depression, and you see this kind of large exodus of people out of the church, all of the rest of it. And so I don't think that there's enough scholars or academics who are studying the kind of psychological fallout of a lot of the push of the social justice movements, including Clinton's so-called welfare to work program, which sought not to re-promote traditional family values of fathers who are providing and women who are homemakers. No, it didn't seek to do that at all. The agenda was in the name: welfare to work. They wanted women to go to work, and it got back more to a FDR agenda, a FDR vision, more so than a traditional values-based vision of the father being the provider, the woman being the homemaker, and the children being brought up under that safe and secure structure. And, that's how I see it.
It's crazy, Chad, you mentioned that. I remember growing up in California during that time period, and I remember welfare was huge, food stamps, welfare, Medicaid, Medicare, people having crack babies and getting a check to take care of it was just so much government money being thrown around during the 90s. It was insane. It was so many people making a living off of either welfare or taking care of, I want to say crack baby, because that was a big thing when I was coming up as a crack baby. You got like $1,000 some a month to take care of a crack baby.
Wow.
Or to open some type of house up. It was just so much government money being thrown around to almost created a culture in California. And to me, today you see the average Black Californian is a liberal to the core. It is a government liberal truster. They game in the system. Working is a huge thing in California, and I realized that culture started back when I was coming. They were just throwing around so much money. So you see Clinton, somebody even told me in the chat here, they said that they got a check to complete the course, they got paid to complete the training course.
Wow.
Not necessarily getting a job, but they got money to complete the course. And again, like you said, it's that big F word, funding. And you're right, it does go back to FDR. And really, you're putting women back to work, but this is, like you said, a further divide of the family. No men are mentioned. Ironically, there's no programs for men being mentioned at all. And as I think about it now, all that money that was being thrown around by the government was going to women. It was going to women for the food stamps. They got a certain amount of money per child. Like, women were having children for the government assistance. I mean, literally. And people used to make a good living off of it. Ironically, back then, I don't know about now, but back then. But that mindset, the psychology behind that, has a lot of Black Californians today still trusting like the government, still looking for the government to sort of, I guess, bail them out. Even with reparations, just has all these folks in California in a frenzy. The fact that Governor Newsom even said we're going to have reparations, Black folks just going like crazy because they've been through the era where the government was handing out money, so it's like a real thing to them. Like we could possibly get X amount of dollars. Now I don't believe it's going to happen, but
Wow. So what do you think is next in all of this? I mean, again, I was able to show, Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin sitting there, two homosexuals talking about their involvement and a lot of this decadence and this decay. Really, I think decay is a proper word to use.
Yeah.
You think of a dead body there, flies eating away at it, animals eating away out of it. It's decayed, right? Where you see this decay of black culture, quote unquote, from where it was and how it fell from grace. Whenever you had these people like James Baldwin, like what's that poet's name? Langston Hughes, Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois. You had all these people who the media told us that they were our leaders. Our newspaper told us that they were our leaders. Everybody was telling us for the better half of the 20th century that these were our leaders. So we said, okay, we're going to go your way. We went their way. They got their hands, on the steering wheel, so to speak, and they virtually wrecked the vehicle off the bridge into the ocean. Like that's what happened. Like that's what happened to Black culture as a result of the leadership of these people. In 1972, they're sitting there talking about it, about their involvement in it. Nikki Giovanni says, the only thing that's changed is the Black woman. We are playing this kind of dominant role. We want a new vision. We want a new way. I don't want you to be a provider. I just want you to be there for my emotional needs. And you see James Baldwin sitting there saying yes and amen. So that's what happened. And then, of course, everything that happened after the fact, as you move into the 80s, you see, as a clip showed, that you went from having 3 and 4 children, Black children, growing up with both their mother and their father in the home, to now 1 in 4 Black children growing up with a mother and a father in the home. Just in that space of time between when Nikki Giovanni said that and in the mid 80s, which is very rapid. And again, I take that back to a kind of mindset shift that took place. And then, of course, you have the glorification of degeneracy and thug life. You had Tupac, who was the street poet, celebrating this concept of the thug life, the rose that grew from the concrete, basically romanticizing this kind of thug life culture. And then from Tupac to this very day, you have people like Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, people who are very talented, but again, they don't challenge thug life. They justify it. They give it validity, and they reinforce it lyrically. And I use music because there's something interesting about music. Lucifer was he was a musician, right? There's something that happens spiritually whenever music is being played, whenever you're listening to it. There's something about it that is very alluring. But also, specifically as it relates to hip hop, the lyrics are supposed to be a reflection of culture or the state of a certain subsect of culture. And so there's a reason why I keep bringing it back to music, because there's a lot going on there. But anyway, all that to say, when you look at the vast history of the way in which this culture shift has unfolded throughout the 20th century, and we now find ourselves in the 21st century, where do you think it goes from here?
I think it goes back to a modern day version of indentured servitude or slavery. right now they're priming everybody for socialism. And sadly enough, all of the black leaders, all of the black conditioning and programming moves black people to move as one person. So the solution would be to benefit all black people, even though it's a smaller percentage that is probably even in need or even doing the crime or whatever. That is what is being spoken to, and so that will be the solution will be given to that group for everybody. And so I see black people going back to slavery. You mentioned that the Pew research study where black folks voted over 50%, 60% for socialism. And again, someone even mentioned Section 8 housing. I forgot about that. So imagine when I grew up, there was the government giving you money, food, shelter, and medical, everything. So that creates a culture in the inner city among black people. And you got the selling of food stamps, you Section 8, all this stuff. But I just believe that it goes back to slavery, because what can a nation do without a family structure intact? If 80% of the children, almost 80% are being born to single mothers, where does that look like in 20 years? If we add black culture and where it's headed, we add the influences of music, media, propaganda, social media, and we have the majority of children being born in single parent households, what does that look like in 20 years? It's not going to be good. We're entering the fourth industrial revolution, and you don't hear any Democrats talking about black people being in the technical fields. You don't see any of that stuff. We're moving to a digital age, literally. We're going to be competing with AI, and they're talking about race. So to me, they're going to put black folks in a position where black folks will somehow take this other route to combat racism. That's why I'm so leery of this whole reparations thing, because I'm like, what's going to be the string attached to racism? Like, what are they going to say? For you to get this money, you got to do this. What are they going to say? If you get this money, you have to do this. You have to meet this criteria. So again, I see it heading to the worst place. Without a family structure intact, you can't build generational wealth. You can't really build a community. And you're really kind of vulnerable. And then you got all this, even in the dating world, where you see on social media where it's like this combating between black men and black women going back and forth. Like, I just don't see how this ends well at all.
Right.
So I just know from growing up that welfare culture with trusting the government is still there today. And if most folks are presented with an opportunity to get something from the government, they're going to take it.
Right. I guess my next question would be so what do you think, because I mentioned earlier in the live that when it comes to the so-called man in the house rule, which again, I don't blame the rule as much as I blame the men who walked away from their obligations and the women who chose the government over their man. But to the point I made earlier, you didn't see other ethnic groups, because there's nothing in welfare legislation that says that this is only for black people. Like, there's nothing in that legislation that says that. This was a kind of free for all, so long as you make under a certain certain income. And so why is it that other groups did not utilize welfare to the same degree as black people did? And not only that, even to the extent that other ethnic groups utilize welfare, why is it that you didn't have the same effect in terms of men who were not in the picture as you did other ethnic groups? So what would be your response to that? Why were blacks affected more than other ethnic groups? If you look at the numbers, right? If you look at the rate by which a black child grows up without a father in their life, compared to other ethnic groups. If numbers count for anything, why is it that the numbers are so drastically different for blacks than they are for other ethnic groups?
I would say that the struggle is more important than the community. So it's more important that you fight against the system than you build your family, if that makes sense. Being the revolutionary, being the one standing up against the system, being the one scratching and surviving, being the one thriving in ghetto life, to me, excuse me, that became more important than just being married and raising your children the right way. And so, you mentioned this thing where they were rejecting, I guess, Western society, Western culture. They were rejecting marriage, rejecting monogamy, rejecting all of these things under the guise that was, we said earlier, like that's capitalism, that's white supremacy, that's these things. And so, but those are decent things though. So you mentioned this earlier a few times where you say it's not about white or black, it's about decent and indecent. Well, the problem is if being decent is seen as you capitulating to the system, then to reject it is not a bad look. So so if we think about it, those Black Panthers weren't promoting marriage.
Right.
Those Black nationalists weren't promoting marriage. Those Pan-African, like these groups that are rising up with their fists in the air, aren't promoting marriage. Tupac, revolutionary, not promoting marriage. Umar Johnson, revolutionary, promotes actually polygyny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that traditional family structure that our grandparents grew up in, and probably your parents grew up under, or did. I was talking to my family members this weekend, and they've been married. Like some have been married 58 years and 39 years. I'm just like, this is amazing. Like just to be married that long. But guess what? That's what's important, and they still together. And so to me, traditional values got trumped with this new. I got to blame the civil rights movement. I got to blame this thing to fight against the system, to be this type of rebel. Even think about NWA. NWA's most popular song was F the Police. Now, the whole rest of the album is talking about decadence, death, destruction, and damnation. But the most popular song was F the Police. That's what gets the buy-in from Black people. I listened to that album today, and that album is filled with, that album will get somebody canceled today. And so, but Black folks accepted it because it was F the Police as the lead song out of there, or maybe the second single, I don't know. But that was one or two of the major singles. But my point is that this revolutionary, woke, Black power, civil rights, all that became way more appealing than a traditional family with the man, the woman, and the child in a home, cutting the grass on Saturday, just like going on picnics. Like that stuff wasn't appealing anymore. And this new culture emerged where Black folks had to be the constant. You see it today, where somebody could be a millionaire and they still have to let you know they're struggling somehow.
Right, right.
It's like even somebody like LeBron James, he has the most ideal life, right? And he still says, I don't know when I walk out of my door whether or not I'm going to be shot today. It's just, so again, that has, he doesn't promote. If you think about it, these folks don't promote family. You haven't seen LeBron go on live and say, man, make sure y'all get married. Man, we got to get, they don't talk like that. They don't talk anything about family. When they get on social media and start talking, it's about the system.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're right. And somebody in the comment section, I saw it earlier. I would try to find it, but they were talking about, well, hip hop ended in the 80s, and I think I saw 88 as one year. I saw 92 as another year. I would argue that from its inception, hip hop was set upon a trajectory of decadence and degeneracy. There was never a golden age of hip hop. That never existed. I wanted to do something which I never do on this channel. We react to clips all the time, but we never react to music videos. And I wanted to get Blanche's take on a song that a lot of us know. This one's from 1982, so this is well before 88 and 92. In fact, I would argue that this is the most remembered hip hop song of the 80s. So let me bring in Blanche before I bring up this video. Let's see here.
I bet I know what it is too. I knew it.
So let's live react to this. The messaging, the lyrics, and this song, by the way, is literally called "The Message." So let's respond to the messaging of this music video, shall we?
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
So you see the projects here, the brick building with the windows, and some of them are broken. And the first line is, "It's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how to keep from going under." Well, we'll see where it goes.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Broken glass everywhere. People pissing on the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back. Junkies in the alley with the baseball bat.
Oh man, I want the outfit though. But yeah.
Roaches in the front room. Well, no. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, the junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. Like, think about the imagery of that, right? So far, we've established that it's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how to keep from going under. And then there's broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the stage. You know, they just don't care. You can't pay his rent. He can't, you know, the man with the tow truck is about to repossess his car. I mean, like... Like, are these life-giving lyrics? I mean, this is a far cry from just, what was it, 20 years prior, the kind of Motown, happy-go-lucky kind of music that made you want to just, you know, take your wife out on a date. Like, that's the spirit that the music got you into. And now it's roaches in the front room, rats in the back, the junkie in the alley with the baseball bat. This is hip-hop. This is the inception of hip hop. But go ahead, Blanche. I want you to make your point before we keep
Oh no,
moving.
I mean, yeah. And so if you notice, he's talking about the decadence of his environment. Even though the people are poor, they shouldn't just be breaking glass and pissing everywhere. So that speaks to the people. That doesn't speak to the system. That speaks to the culture of the people there to even destroy their community and not even care. Like, and then he even says on top of that, at least the roaches and the rats got some order because they in the front, one's in the front and one's in the back. So they got some shit. They got some shit. But you know, everybody else is crazy.
No, but like I see one of the comments, they said that, well, he's speaking to the reality of the 80s. He's talking about his conditions, and it's you know, Blanche, I couldn't have said it better myself, that poverty does not equal degeneracy. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. My wife just read a book by Marva Collins called The Marva Collins Way. I encourage everybody in the comment section, buy this book. Buy this book. Marva Collins was an educator in Chicago. She was a substitute teacher, I think, in West Chicago. And she saw that these schools were actively doing a disservice in terms of educating these kids. They had no interest in educating the kids. They had more of an interest in getting federal funding from the government than they did in actually educating these kids. And so she was fed up with it. So what she did was she took out an early retirement. She she transformed the top floor of her brownstone into a one-room schoolhouse. And this was in the 80s, the late 80s. She turned it into a one-room schoolhouse, and she accepted the kids that the Chicago school system were dismissing as, mentally retarded and learning disabilities and behavioral issues. She took in those kids, and what she did was she taught them how to read with phonics, with hyper focusing on phonics. And the objective of this is, if you develop a love and a joy for reading, all the other subjects become a breeze for you. That was the philosophy from which she operated. And the kids that graduate from Marva Collins School went on to college. They got degrees. They were successful. Look her up. She's a hero in my personal humble opinion. And it's a shame that more black people in America know who Jane Elliott is than they do Marva Collins. That's a shame. T.I. I think he had Marva Collins, or not Marva Collins. He had Jane Elliott on his podcast at least 2 times. She's been on the Breakfast Club. She's been on Roland Martin's show. Jane Elliott is everywhere, but none of them would dare mention the name Marva Collins, who was effective, who wasn't focusing on racism, who wasn't focusing on the fact that you live in Chicago and you're poor and this, that, and the other. The reason why I bring her up in reference to this song is because she came from an impoverished area in Alabama. That's where she grew up. And she talked about in her book that even though a lot of the people on her block lived in shacks or, subpar housing, you better believe there wasn't any trash in their yard. What was their front porch was swept up. If you were walking down the street and you had tears in your clothes, or you didn't look like you had some sense, like you were dressed in an indecent way, you will get called out about it in the South. She said when she moved from Alabama to Chicago, it was like a culture shock because people wore poverty in a different way. People didn't care. There was trash everywhere. People didn't care how they dressed and how they looked and how they smelled and all the things. And so how do you go from people making the same income in the South that people are making in Chicago, but they look drastically different and the mindset's drastically different? The issue isn't poverty. The issue is values. That's the issue. Values transcend income. You can be wealthy and lack values. You can be poor and lack values. You can be wealthy and have values. You can be poor and have values. That it has nothing to do with what's in your bank account. It has nothing to do with what your income is. It has what it has to do with is what's in your heart. That's what it has to do with. And so, yes, it may be true that these were the conditions in 1980s Bronx or New York or what have you. That could be the case, and it is the case until Rudy Giuliani came and cleaned it up. But again, don't blame poverty for the issues that they're talking about in the video. It has nothing to do with poverty as much as it has to do with the values that the people had in these specific areas. Go ahead, Blanche.
I think the best illustration of this is if you go to, let's say you go to like an inner city school, there are certain classrooms in the school that you walk by there and it's ordered. There are certain classrooms you walk by and students are learning. There's certain classes you walk by, teachers are teaching and engaged with the students. To me, like you said, it's values. Because the values are going to create the culture. What you think is valuable, you're going to create a culture around it to preserve it. So to me, there are people in the inner city, in the hoods, that you went to their house and it was spotless and immaculate. It was nice. But again, it's what they find valuable. I think the notion is that poverty means nothing is to be good. Meaning that if you're poor, you have an excuse for everything. How you look, how you operate, how you act, everything. It almost gives you an excuse because you can just say, well, they're like that because they're from an impoverished environment. But I would venture to say that your environment doesn't shape you. Your environment allows you to grow and adapt from it. So there are some kids that grew up in the inner city that I know their parents was on crack, but they went to school and got straight A's. I know a good friend of mine I grew up with, his mother, it was 3 of them, his brother and his sister. His mother was literally on drugs. They lived in the projects, but he and his siblings, they got good grades. They were in all these programs. Like they excelled, and you would never know at home they lived like that. You would never know. And so again, you're 100% correct. It's value, it's character, it's principles, it's all these things. And to me, your environment doesn't dictate that at all. It just doesn't. It's what you want.
And stimulated students, I mean, I know, I know good and well you're smarter than that. Like, I know that you can give a book report on Cat in the Hat. Like, I know you know the basic premise of what Cat in the Hat is about. I mean, I know you're making a point, and I take your point. And of course, there are anomalies or exceptions to the rule in terms of people who may be good at, one subject that isn't reading but is terrible at reading. I would venture to say that you're not terrible at reading. If I'm going to take a wild guess, I would venture to say that. However, reading and comprehension is the basis of understanding. Is the basis of being able to delve into other subjects, into other topics. If you go to the library, a library which has a myriad of books on myriad topics, that library is no use to you if you don't at least understand how to read. And that's my point, and that's Marva Collins's point, which is that if you first develop and master the skill of reading, for you, it just becomes from there a case of kind of satisfying your curiosity on other subjects that follow, right? Like, for example, my kids, they know how to read and they enjoy reading. If I take them to the library, it's a free-for-all. They can just go and start grabbing books on whatever subject that they wish to explore, because they at least have that skill of reading down. And that's the point that I'm making. The fact is, when you look at the schools that Marva Collins was teaching at, the kids were not reading at grade level. You had kids in 8th grade reading at a 2nd grade reading level. And that was a problem. And it was these kids that they were dismissing as being, having some kind of learning disability or what have you. But after a year of being in her school, they're quoting Shakespeare. How does that happen other than having a teacher that is actually willing to be rigid with you enough and to impress upon you that you're not an idiot, that you're not stupid, that you're not dumb, that you're not what your peers call you, that you're not what whomever in your life is a naysayer call you, but you are indeed more than a conqueror, because guess what? Marva Collins was a Christian. She was a believer. And the fact is, what our schools are trying to have the educators do, the teachers do, is to embrace secularism and to teach children the ways of secularism through SEL, through culturally informed learning, they call it, through all these different acronyms that essentially means we want to turn your kids into secular humanists. Is basically what it all means. Is basically what it all boils down to. Let's see. Stimulated student says, I'm speaking in hyperbole. Let me blow this up because it's print small. Okay, here we go. I'm speaking in hyperbole, but my reading skills were much lower than the classes. My ability indicated. I failed chemistry in college 3 times because I couldn't read my textbooks. I mean, again, I'm interested in just talking to you on a one-on-one level about this, because again, there are exceptions to the rule. There's no such thing as a generalization. I mean, a generalization in itself doesn't necessarily mean that you are saying that this is a unanimous thing. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but again, it's very rare that somebody excels in one subject, say chemistry or what have you, but just don't have a basic understanding of reading. That's very rare that happens.
And he said, I failed chemistry in college. So clearly he's above an average. He's in college. So that we're not going to act like he's struggling at chemistry in some high school in Chicago. He's in college. So
right
now he may be undisciplined when he's reading. He may not like to read. It may have been boring. So it's a lot of factors that go into when you're young studying chemistry. He got to be very disciplined. So, Yeah, but for the most part, if a child can read, they're going to speak better. They're going to comprehend better. I've seen it. My cousin, she used to read all the time. All she did was read. She's a lawyer now, and she just read all the time. And when you enjoy reading, it's going to reflect in even how you process information. It increases your IQ. So I would say that what do you say? Reading is fundamental. I would agree. And to Marva Collins's testament, things do become easier once you have reading and comprehension. Because now, if I don't know how to do something, I can at least know the gist of it by just reading it and knowing. Even like when you do like SATs, like what does this word mean? If you read the sentence, you can pretty much figure out what the word means based on the sentence. So I think reading is the first foundational building block in education.
Exactly. So somebody said that the song actually gets better and it gives a positive message by the end. So what do you think? Do you think we should keep listening?
Yeah, let's see. Okay. I know the song. Let's see.
Hold on, let me.
With the baseball bat, I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with the tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, car.
Your car wouldn't be repossessed if you were paying the bills. So again, like I'm not seeing. Again, it's like it's not an injustice that's delivered upon you. It's merely all these things could be preventable, right? Everything that he said so far about the conditions in which he's living, people pissing on the stage, this, that, and the other, your car being repossessed, all these things are preventable. They just are. I'm sorry, I have no sympathy for it, but let's keep listening.
I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Standing on the front stoop, hanging out the window, watching all the cars go by, roaring as the breezes blow. A crazy lady living in a bag, eating out of garbage pails. Used to be a fag hag, such a dance to tango. Skipped the life and tango. A zircon princess seemed to lost her senses. Down at the peep show, watching all the creeps, so she could tell her stories to the girls back home. She went to the city and got so did it. She had to get a pimp, she couldn't make it on her own. Don't push me, cause I'm.
You have any thoughts on that?
So basically, the girl went to the city and became a degenerate. Like she went to the city and became a degenerate. She couldn't support herself and got on welfare. That's what he said.
Hey,
and
these are his words.
She went back home bragging. I mean, my thing is this, right? He's saying it's like a jungle, but you're getting yourself lost in the jungle, though. Like you're doing it. Like, nobody's forcing you to go in the jungle and get lost. You're doing it. The jungle is very manageable.
It is manageable, and you can move out of it if you determine. I used to make minimum wage. I mean, let's not get it. Like I used to make $7.25 per hour when I was 16, 17 years old. My checks were like $200 something a week. And I said, I don't want to live like this. Like, this is not the life. Like, I don't want for my life to be this. Like, I need to get a skill. I need to be a high earner because I want a family one day. Like, I want to be able to retire young. I want to buy land. I want to have kids. Like, that's what I wanted. And I couldn't do that on minimum wage. And so I resolved to get a skill, to learn a trade, to where I could put myself in a position to make more money. I got married very young to my wife, who I'm still together with, the love of my life. I'm very happy and content with where I am in life. And again, if I were single, I probably would have went a different route than the route that I ended up going. But my point is like, and this is why, not to get too philosophical, but this is why I don't like using the word class, right? Lower class, middle class, working class, wealthy class. I don't like using the word class because class feels too much to me like caste, C-A-S-T-E. In countries where they have caste systems, you are born into a certain caste, a certain sect of society, you die in that caste. There's no way for you to elevate upward out of that caste. You remain in that situation until you die. In a meritocracy, you are able to elevate your station in life if you provide or productive. If you are productive and you have some kind of skill, some kind of trade, some kind of talent that you can exchange for capital for the betterment of yourself and your family. And so that's the system in which we live. Now, of course, it's become more of a socialist system over the past 100 years with the inaction of certain policies that de-incentivizes work, that de-incentivizes motherhood, that de-incentivizes fatherhood. And as such, we are becoming more and more of a degenerate country. That's a side note. However, for the most part, we still have some remnants of a meritocracy. And as such, again, if you are born into a impoverished family, if you're born to a single mother, whatever the case may be, you do have the opportunities to elevate your station in life and to not be stuck where you are. You have that. And there's plenty of resources that are available for you to elevate out of that are not government resources. Hell, you can DM me and talk to me and I can help you figure it out. If you're genuinely trying to figure out a way to kind of elevate your station in life. And so, and it's not just me, there's dozens or if not hundreds of people out there who are willing to do the same thing. There's YouTube. YouTube is a great source in terms of how do I, prepare for a job interview, or, what are some shortages in terms of the labor market that I can actually put my foot into to where I can learn that skill or learn that trade to try to make up for the lack. Here in Texas, we have a shortage of mechanics. We have a shortage of electricians. We have a shortage of plumbers. There's just not a lot of young people getting into these trades. And so there's a need. There's a market for it. There's just not a lot of people getting into them. And so what this song is talking about, you would think, oh, it's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how to keep from going under. You would think that this is a box. This is the context that I'm stuck in, or that these people are stuck in. And there's no way to remove yourself from that box and elevate your station. And it's not a life-giving concept. Like, these lyrics are not life-giving at all. A lot of the music that's out there, it sounds good. You can vibe out to this music, but it's not life-giving because by the end of it, you're thinking, woe is me, more so than you are, how can I elevate my station in life? You have anything you want to say to that, Chuck, before I keep playing these lyrics?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, again, this is that everybody wants to be in the struggle. Everybody wants to be a part of the group that has to fight. Nobody wants to be perceived as having an easy life. Like, everybody wants to be, they've come up with terms like grinding, the struggle, grinding. It's all this, I'm surviving this. And even him, think about it, they're dressed all nice, walking over broken glass in the projects. Like, look how they're dressed, but the environment around them is still, in turmoil and chaos. So they're portraying the same image. Even though I'm in the hood or whatever, I'm still able to look fly. It's almost this rebellious, but they blame the hood on the white man. So it's like, if I can survive in the hood, I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm overcoming the odds, and I'm sticking it to the white man, so to speak.
That's crazy.
Close to the edge, I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. My brother's doing fast on my mother's teeth.
Oh, it looks like they had cornrows in the 82. I didn't know that. I thought that didn't become popular till like the 90s.
Ain't nothing new under the sun. All this stuff gets recycled. They done brought bell bottles back.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He had cornrows in 82.
Watching too much, it's just not healthy. All my children in the daytime, Dallas at night. Can't even see so did it. She had to get a push, she couldn't make it on her own. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
My brother's doing bad, stole my mother's TV. Says she watches too much, it's just not healthy. All my children in the daytime, Dallas at night. Can't even see the game or the Sugar Ray fight. The bill collectors, they ring my phone and scare my wife when I'm not home. Got a bum education, double-digit inflation. Can't take the train to the job, there's a strike at the station. Neon King Kong standing on my back, can't stop to turn around. Broke my sacroiliac, a mid-range migraine, cancer membrane. Sometimes I think I'm going insane, I swear I might hijack a plane.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the lyrics are cold. Don't get me wrong.
Listen, he was actually spitting though. I ain't gonna listen. He was actually spitting. Now listen, not gonna take it away from him. He was actually spitting.
Yeah. He said, my brother's doing bad. He stole my mother's TV. She watches too much. It's just not healthy. I'm assuming that the brother's on crack, and he took the TV to sell it so he can get money to buy the crack. And whenever he was confronted by the family, when they sat him down and said, "Look, why'd you steal Mama's TV? She just watches it too much. It's not healthy."
Not healthy.
All the while he stole it to buy crack. But that's neither here nor there. But he was actually spitting because, I mean, again, I can't take away from his talent, from his skill, but it's not different. Like, so far, we're about a third through the phone, or a third of the way through the song, and his verse is actually in sync with the rest of the song so far, in terms of this kind of woe is me. Bill collectors are calling my phone. They're scaring my wife when I'm not home, and all these things. Again, bill collectors wouldn't be calling your home if you paid your bills.
Right.
I have no sympathy, because it's very difficult for me to have sympathy when I've been there. Right.
Hold on one second, Chad. We know who this. Are y'all serious? We are dissecting this song. This is a class. This is, you people crazy. We know who this is. Like, come on.
What happened? I guess I can see the comments.
People think we're listening to this song for the first time in life. Like, they're acting like we just, come on, man. Like, we're dissecting the lyrics of the song. Come on, man.
No, but it's one of those songs that are popular, because I've heard this song in my life. Like, it's one of those songs that's popular, but I don't know, at least I haven't heard anyone slow down and actually dissect the lyrics and listen to what's being said. Right?
Right.
Like, that's the part that I'm getting at. Again, the 80s is a very interesting decade for Black America, because who was the most popular pop star in the 80s? Michael Jackson. Who was the most popular basketball player? Was it not Magic Johnson, right? Or am I thinking of...
Yeah, I would say it was Magic and probably Bird at first. Then it was Michael Jordan.
Okay. But in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay. But my point is like, you had, I think, the Cosby Show, which was in the late 80s or something like that. So you had, as far as the Black image is concerned, you had a lot of positive imagery going for quote unquote Black America. At the same time, you had a lot of what you see in this music video. You know what I mean? You had a lot of what you hear in these lyrics that was going on as well, which was a kind of continuation of 1970s kind of Blaxploitation. And so my point is like, to the extent that you have people who are saying that there was this kind of golden age of hip hop has always been the kind of poetry of the streets. It just has been. And you can't say that there was this kind of golden age where it was positive, where it was this, where it was that, because even to the extent that you had the guys who weren't necessarily rapping about like crime or thugging or anything like that, it kind of produced this kind of spirit of idleness amongst young folks that wasn't really producing anything. I want to share this clip with you all before I continue on with this music video that kind of gives insight into what I'm talking about. Actually, is it on here? I think it's on here. Forget it. But basically, I was going to put it in the montage for this opening video, but I left it out. But it was this young black teenager who basically said, I have no interest in raising my kids. I have 2 kids. I have no interest in raising them. I'd rather just listen to the radio all day with my friends, listen to a lot of the latest hip hop with my friends. This was 1988. And so, of course, they're on the street corner with a big boom box and they're just like listening to music all day. Like that's literally all they're doing. And so if you're going to tell me that 1988 was a time in hip hop culture that was talking about something positive, why is it that these young black folks who are listening to the music on the street corners in 1988, why weren't they inspired by that music to get their butts up and get a job? You're telling me that it was positive, right? But yet I have clips of young black men listening to this so-called golden era hip hop, and they're not encouraged to raise their own kids. They're talking about that I have no interest in getting a job, no interest in finishing school. I'd rather just listen to the radio all day with my friends. How do you explain that if it was a golden age of positive hip hop? I'll wait for your answers. I want to try to find that clip because people think I'm just talking. I want to give you evidence and facts to what I'm talking about.
So if you think about it, that song came out in 82, right?
Mm-hmm.
NWA came out in 1987.
Right.
So within a 5-year span, the golden age of hip hop, the positivity of hip hop, the everything, all evaporated in 5 years. How is that even possible?
And my point here, folks, is that like it didn't start out this one way, and then took a huge turn into something negative. Like that's not how it started. That's not what happened. Rather, it continued on the same trajectory from which it started. Same thing with the civil rights movement. It's not like Martin Luther King was on the right side of history and then BLM took what he was doing and the Black Panthers took what he was doing and went all the way left. No, Martin Luther King, if you look at his writings, if you look at what he believed, he was a Marxist. He talked about being favorable to Marxism. The people who were in his inner circle talked about how he talked about in private his infatuation with Marxism and how he didn't talk about it in public for fear of being maligned as a communist. I mean, Clarence B. Jones talked about it. Bayard Rustin talked about it. And so this, and not only that, but James Cone also talked about it. I mean, again, these are verifiable facts. And so it's not like when you look at these social justice movements, when you look at hip hop and you look at all these other things that the culture throws at us, that it started off as this positive thing and then it went leftward. No, it started from deception. It started from a place of frankly, yes, deception. And then it went right in line with the trajectory from which it started. With hip hop, I wouldn't say it's as much deception as much as it was just this kind of decadence and degeneracy and just idleness is where it started. And that's where it is now. And so it's a continuation of it, not as much of a kind of skewing to the left or to the right. It's doing the same thing that it started out as, essentially. And then as far as like this thing called conscious hip hop, I guess from this group you see people like Common, people like Tribe Called Quest, and others, people like Lupe Fiasco. And for me, like when I listen, and I think even, I guess you would consider early Kanye West a kind of conscious hip hop, artist. But even like when you listen to their music, there is a lot of wokeness in their music that is this kind of anti-capitalism, this kind of anti-Western culture. They're not talking about family values. It's very leftist in its ideology. If you go back and listen to what's the band with Chuck D and
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy, again, conscious rap. When you listen to what they're saying, again, it's not family values oriented. It just isn't. Of course, they're not talking about bitches and hoes and pimping and thugging. They're not talking about that, But at the same time, just because they're not talking about that doesn't automatically make what they're saying positive and good.
Right.
I mean, can we be at least intellectually honest enough to admit that? Can we at least be a little bit more deeper in our thinking to admit that? Just because a hip hop artist isn't talking about, strippers dancing doesn't necessarily mean that they are talking about something positive. Now, there are hip hop artists that do deliberately talk about things that are positive, but again, be a little bit more deeper in your thinking and not just completely embrace an artist because they're not talking about, thoughts and thugging and pimping. Come on now.
Think about it, Chad. If you look at look what Public Enemy ended up doing. Flavor Flav ended up having a reality TV show. He sold out technically, and then you had Chuck D ended up endorsing Joe Biden and the jazz. I'm just like, I don't know, man. I just think that if you notice, all these quote unquote gangster rappers have a very special place for in the white liberal circle. White liberals love these Tupac, Snoop Dogg's. They love all these gangster rappers. Even Kamala sat down and met with Lil Baby, and Joe Biden sat with Cardi B, and Maxine Waters sat with Megan Thee Stallion. So the folks with the most degeneracy in the music get to sit at high places with the people that are in charge of the country. So again, it's because it's all part of the same agenda, because they spit the same rhetoric. It's the same narrative. Public Enemy is no different than what Joe Biden is saying.
Right.
Because them saying fight the system ultimately means vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
It ultimately means be a Democrat.
Right.
It ultimately means support Black Lives Matter, because it's the same narrative, it's the same rhetoric, it's this whole fighting against the system just to get a check from the system. So the lyrics, they're entertaining, but if we talk about the impact had to be bad, because just in 5 years we had gangster rap.
Right.
And we haven't looked back. So, and these are the seeds that are planted when you start, if you're telling a story to people through music, there has to be a sobering moment for you to drive home the point. Meaning there has to be a point in a song where people realize this isn't good. They didn't do that with this song.
Right.
It's "Don't Push Me, I'm Close." So if you don't do that, you actually glorify the quote unquote struggle. And that's what we are today.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And again, my point is merely that it's not a deviation from where hip hop started. It's a continuation of where hip hop started. It's a net result. It's a logical conclusion, as it were, of where hip hop started. And that's my point. And again, you can try to, if you have facts to prove otherwise, I'm all ears. Like, I'm open to it. I don't sit here as someone who professes to know everything. Okay, I found this video. So I just wanted to give people an example of what I'm talking about. And this would have been 1988, I believe.
Bow-legged boys.
I love them. They have some gorgeous legs. I just don't know.
Darren Lyle is the father of Clorinda's baby. He is 18 and lives in central Newark. He dropped out of high school when he was 16. He has never held a steady job.
I spend most of my time listening to the radio. When I don't go to school, I don't work, I don't do nothing. Just like this, killing time.
Did you want to have a baby?
Not really. It just happened. She just popped up pregnant. And I just...
Were your friends impressed?
Not a...
But this was a golden age of hip hop. Come on now.
She just popped up pregnant. Like she was the Virgin Mary. He said, I don't know what happened. She just popped up pregnant. This man literally said, I don't know. She just popped up pregnant.
But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Dropped out of school at
She
16.
said he had cute legs. Hold up. He said, I don't know. He just popped up pregnant. She said, I don't know. He just got cute legs. These two people procreated and had children. That's crazy.
Let's see what his legs look like.
His legs
Bow-legged boy.
I love him. They have some gorgeous legs. I just don't know.
Darren Lyle is the father of Clorinda's baby. He is 18 and lives in central Newark. He dropped out of high school when he was 16. He has never held a steady job.
I spend most of my time listening to the radio. When I don't go to school, I don't work, I don't do nothing. Just like this killing time.
Did you want to have a baby?
Not really. It just happened. You know, she just popped up pregnant. Nah, it just...
Were you friends?
He said, did you want to have a baby? He said, no, I don't know. She just popped up pregnant. Listen, man, I don't agree with China that often, but I do understand a philosophy of everybody shouldn't. It shouldn't be all these kids running around. I'm sorry. You know, we got to put some. This dude said he skipped past everything. She popped up pregnant. I don't agree with China, but I understand the premise of we got to regulate some of this childbirth because this is crazy. Like, this is.
No, but my point is like, again, if somebody wants to try to convince me that this era was the golden age of hip hop, positive rap, life-giving rap, productive rap, whatever, why then is the people who are listening to it, your number one listener, are young men who are dropping out of school, getting girls pregnant, have no interest in getting a job, have no interest in being productive? He, by his own admission, said, I don't go to school, I don't work, I don't do nothing. I just sit on this corner all day listening to music with my friends. And they're all surrounded by the boombox, and they're really feeling the music. They're really feeling the vibe of the music that you say is life-giving and productive. I mean,
So
where am I wrong?
His friends are out of school too. His friends are out of school too. It's not just him.
Right. It's not just him. He's not on the corner by himself dancing, break dancing, and moonwalking.
I mean, you make a good point, Chad. If the music is what everybody says it is, then why didn't it promote people to do better? Why did it actually increase the decadence? And Tupac is another. Again, Tupac is seen as what we call like a rap god. But his message was so contradictory. Right. Because he would at one moment say something profound, then the next minute shatter it with like he just was so double-minded and so all over the place. But it kind of feeds into what Black culture is. Like that, they like that erraticness, that you can be a philosopher on Monday, conscious, and then ratchet on Tuesday, you know, and then go back to being conscious and then ratchet, and then, you know, so I guess he kind of fit into what Black culture wants.
Did I accidentally turn off the chats?
I think so, because I haven't moved in a minute.
Okay, YouTube must have done that. People are still watching, though. I don't know what happened to the chat section. But mine haven't moved in a while as well. And I don't see a way to turn it back on. Okay, chat is disabled for live stream. I don't know what that's about. Let's see here. Does that happen when you get like a strike or something? Do you know anything about that, Blanche?
No, only thing I can think of, you didn't get a strike unless somebody probably left a comment that they thought wasn't right. Maybe, I don't know, that's all I can think of. Because someone said one of their comments got removed. earlier.
Okay. Yeah,
But
that's
a
weird.
strike usually doesn't, unless it's a time limit thing. I don't know.
That's actually never happened before, but let's see. Yeah, the last strike I gotten was from 2021 when I posted the an interview that we did with Dr. Peter McCullough. Um,
Yeah, but that strike should be gone by now.
yeah, I'm not
They
sure
should
what
have took it
happened.
off.
I don't know. So, do you know how to turn the comment section on? Because I'm not seeing it on here.
I can't even see it on YouTube at all. Like, it's not even. I don't know how to do it. They somehow got disabled. That's weird.
Yeah, that's weird. Let's see. Yeah, they just kind of stopped coming in. Yeah, sorry, folks. I'm not sure what happened. It just the comment section just went off by itself. I don't know if they struck me for playing the video, the music video, or what. Which it is fair use because we're commenting on the video and dissecting the video and talking about it. We're not just playing it outright.
They don't care about that.
Oh, so you can only just play the audio, and that's it. Like
Yeah,
you
they
can't do
don't
the
care about
video.
that with music. They always give me. It shouldn't have stopped your comments though. Your comments, I don't know what happened, but it wasn't from because the strikes get assessed after the show, and you haven't done anything that's strike worthy.
Okay. Well, that's weird. That I mean, let's see. If you know me and you're watching the comment section, you have my number. If you don't mind, just texting me to tell me how to turn the comment section back on because I'm not seeing anything. Like it's not giving me any options to turn the comment section back on. I do think the show is better whenever people are engaging with the comments.
Oh yeah.
So let's see here. I mean, I can still see people liking the video. I just can't see people commenting on it. Let's see. Comments went off during live. Why are comments... Okay, let's see. You see anything on your end?
I don't see any comments at all on here.
Okay, it says somebody asked the question, why are comments off automatically after I stream live on YouTube? Well, that's not even the right question.
Maybe somebody reported it. I don't know. I can't. I don't really know.
All right, well, sorry, guys. I mean, I'll try to figure it out before the next live and get that worked out. But I actually want to pick back up on that Grandmaster Flash video next time because
Okay.
I think it's better to go through the lyrics of that video or that song while the comment section is on and people can engage with it because I think it's a good discussion to have, right? Like, was hip hop ever good for Black America or for America at large? I've heard people all my life say like, yeah, there was a golden age or there's a golden era of hip hop. And I hear that. I know that's the narrative, but is that the reality? What say you?
Um,
I think
was
that,
there a golden era?
yeah, I
I
think
think
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think there was only a golden era in comparison to what it has become.
Mm-hmm.
Was it ever golden? No, I just think it was a new art form. I wouldn't say it was like jazz. I wouldn't say it was like the Motown era. I wouldn't say it was like the doo-wop era. I wouldn't say it was like the rock and roll era. I would say it was a genre of music that emerged, but again, the music emerged off of the same premise of wokeness. Like its foundation is much rooted in like the propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Its foundation wasn't rooted in an alternative to what I guess ghetto life should be or what black life should be. It was pretty much a glorifying or indulging. That's why they used to say, "Oh, we're just telling a story." They would say that to justify they were actually glorifying and embellishing
Mm-hmm.
because they never showed you the bad part of it. Even when like Tupac had Brenda's Got a Baby, he did Brenda's Got a Baby, but then you know the song is basically one-sided. It's not talking about a person making better choices, thinking like it does. Again, all this stuff feeds into this narrative, this woke narrative of the system is holding people down, and so the music was created out of that. And to me, that's not really a pure concept. NWA, even the name of the group and all the songs, you got to think they swept the country by storm, the world by storm, based on their lyrics. But think about it. What were they talking about? If it was really a golden era of hip hop, like everybody says, then NWA would have been rejected.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
would have been ostracized. To say what they were saying would have been like, no way, we don't want this. But it wasn't. Matter of fact, Dolores Tucker had to try to go on a campaign to stop all of this rap. You got to think, what about Two Live Crew with Luke?
Right.
Just think about how the music, how it went after this quote unquote golden era. So to say that it took a turn, when did it take a turn? Who was the first person to come out with a song that was not golden era? Who was it? What artist came out with a song that said this is where everything shifted? This is where it took a turn for the left. You don't see that anywhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like when the party switched. Well, when did the party switch? Nobody really knows. So when did it take a turn?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Was that? I think Lauryn Hill was probably one of the few artists who, was actually talking about positive things, if not positive, then at least really kind of checking the kind of degenerate culture, like not embracing it or celebrating it, but basically putting it on notice. She's one of the few mainstream artists who had that ability and that willingness to do that. But those are very few and far in between,
But I would also say, Chad, that Lauryn Hill, that was her last real album, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to think, like, her album was positive. Like her album was an anomaly in the sense that it was a mainstream artist album that was fundamentally hip hop. And it was pretty much all positive, no cursing. You got to think, no cursing, no, like, none of that stuff. And guess what? After that, she went crazy. So it's kind of like that album is by itself. And then if you think about it, the next female artist to rival her Billboard positions was guess who? Cardi B. So you see where even after Lauryn Hill album, where the music went and this Cardi B topping the charts like Lauryn Hill did, we can all agree that Lauryn Hill had way more substance than Cardi B.
Right. It's not even a challenge.
Right. But that's where we are. And so I just think that me having more knowledge now, this whole hip hop culture was birthed from, I'd venture to say the folks behind hip hop, the movement, were Marxists. They were the same people. It was the same group because they were still pushing that same message.
Right. Well, we'll pick up on this again next time. We're at 3.5 hours. And I want to continue on with this this hip hop discussion because I think that there is some disagreement. Obviously, I saw some disagreement in the audience, which is fine. You know what I mean? I'm cool with people, disagreeing with me. I welcome that discussion. I welcome that engagement. But just like I tell my kids, like you can't make a comment and not back it up, right? Like if you make a comment, I want you to be able to to back it up, and let's talk it out. Like, let's hash it out and try to figure it out. Because the thing is, this notion that, oh, there was a golden age of hip hop. Again, I understand that that's narrative, but I'm not one to just go along with something because it's a narrative. I've been told all my life that the civil rights movement was good for America and good for Black America. That's the narrative until I found out that it wasn't. And so I'm at this point now where I'm just questioning everything, not just for the sake of questioning it, but just for the sake of not being fooled once again and being gullible once again to the culture, just because it's somebody said it in a position of authority, nobody challenged it, and we all just running with it, right? And that's what we are supposed to do as believers. Like the Bible says, to test every spirit to see if it's of God. And so you can't just make a claim, especially on this show, and not have a way of backing it up or supporting it, or at least present it in a form of asking questions so as to really talk about it and hash it out more so than just going along with it just because the culture says that it's it's the law of the land.
And to even go back to Lauryn Hill, she had a gospel song on her album.
Yeah.
So her album pretty much it took everything by storm, but you see it wasn't ever duplicated.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't let it happen again. And I kind of believe that it was an accident. Like they didn't know that her album was even going to do what it did, and it just took off. And but again, like you said, where was the golden era?
Mm-hmm.
If anything, we could put albums in the golden era and put possibly Lauryn Hill's album in that golden era, maybe, or something. But I remember even back in the day, MC Hammer used to have positive songs on his album, songs about God and everything. He was called a sellout. He was rejected. Mm-hmm. So you can't say that music hip hop was good if they were rejecting positive artists. I'm just saying it's just a lot. Once we look back and we really dissect it, we actually probably should play Lauryn Hill's song, that doo-wop thing, where she talks about the perspective of men and women, and she doesn't glamorize the culture.
Mm-hmm.
She condemns it, and she tells the people to beware of folks that are indulging in that culture, participating in that culture.
Right. Yeah, that's a good song. I know that Kanye sampled it in in his new album Donda. But anyway, I'm sure that was very expensive for him to do that. But anyway, as usual, great live. I'm going to be turning all the lives that we've done so far into a podcast. So from now on, not only will everybody in the audience be able to listen to or watch it on YouTube, but also listen to it on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching this video after it already went live, after it already went air, or let me slow down. If you're watching this video after it already went live, after it already aired, do feel free to leave a super thanks, I think it's called. Again, I'm building all of that money up. I'm going to be utilizing it to advance the show, promote the show, market the show, do a better job as far as the whole production, and then be able to, in a sense, monetarily compensate the people that are on the show, the panel, who make the show so great. This show wouldn't be anything without you all, so thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in, as usual. Hopefully, eventually, we can go from doing it just once a week to doing it more often. So without further ado, thank you all for watching, and God bless.
Thank you.